Good morning, Dr. Lamb.
Morning, Candace. How are you?
Ooh, it's been a rough semester, Dr. Lamb.
No. Yeah, I know it has been for everybody, and I'm sorry about that. I just
Oh no, I don't
tough
know if
time.
anybody told you. Yeah, I don't know if anybody told you, but I quit. I had quit my job at A&T. It had became very stressful.
What are you doing now then?
I got a job at St. Aug back home in Raleigh. So
Good for you.
like last class, I was actually like moving back to Raleigh, trying to get my stuff together. So it's just been a lot. A
Yeah.
lot of policy, a lot of stuff we've been talking about in class. I was going through those things.
No, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm glad one, you back home.
Oh yeah, I can deal with the stress better now.
That's what,
Being
yeah,
back.
exactly.
Okay.
I was listening last night to now I'm not a big fan of his. Let me my disclaimer here.
Okay.
Kevin O'Leary, who's one of the sharks on Shark Tank. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't like that show. I don't like the concept of the show. I have so many bad things about that organizationally. But one of the things that he was talking about was data last night. About people, the stress level that people have, that they want to be at home. That they will leave a good job for another job simply that will let them be at home or stay at home. That's how folks are coping with the stress of what's going on in the world. And not just COVID. I mean, what's going on especially in the United States now with the ramped up, I hate you, I want you to die politics, which we haven't seen since the 1960s. Good morning, Heather. Where people killing one another.
Yeah.
You know, the national discourse is now at 11. You know, that's a Spinal Tap reference from the old movie. You know, and that's he is right about that though. I've been reading a lot about that. I mean, you know, and so you don't have to agree with it, or you don't have to. I mean, in terms of research and what companies want folks to believe is their opinion is valid. It's real data, and you can try to ignore it at your own peril. And I'll show you what I mean. Share screen. This is the email that came out late yesterday afternoon as a reminder to the faculty at Gardner-Webb from the faculty chair. You see it's underlined here. It is an institutional expectation that we attend the faculty meeting in a face-to-face format. Exceptions can be made only for faculty who have approved modified work agreements, which you can't get, are under documented quarantine restrictions. A very threatening email yesterday about, you know, you better show up to work, you better show up to this meeting. We did them for a year and a half virtually. We've moved everything online to Blackboard so that you have all the materials. Why is it that you need to be there in person? Other than we're demanding that you do that because things are going to be like they used to be, whether they are or not. And ignoring the data out there, ignoring the health. Now, as crazy as this sounds, I'm probably the median age-wise of the professorship at Gardner-Webb, but you see how old I am. And I'm probably the median. I'm probably in about the middle. There's probably the age range of the professorship at Gardner-Webb. Now, the nursing folks, some of them are younger, but the traditional graduate faculty, And the undergraduate faculty that are on the main body of the campus, you know, the nursing school is down the road just a little bit. It's what, half a mile down the road. But so they aren't really on campus anyway. And they're younger and healthier. Now, unfortunately, they are the school that lost the first faculty. I mean, we did have a nursing faculty to die from COVID, but they're a little down the road from us, the main campus there. But I'm talking about the main campus where everybody has to work and be together every day. I'm probably the median. The range there is probably from 50 to 80. David's on call. All right, David. Yep, it's good to see you this morning. But why would you demand a bunch of old people get together in an auditorium with no real air handling, or no need to be there? It's just a faculty meeting. Everything that we have is online in Blackboard. All the committee reports, everything you need, the provost report, everything's already right there in Blackboard. Why would you need to be there other than we demand that things return back to the way we want them to be? I can, that's just hope. That's just gaslighting. We're going to make things be normal. Well, things aren't normal. Not what used to be normal. This is the new normal. We refuse to accept the data that there's a new normal. And corporations and businesses and colleges that don't do that, and don't recognize the need for people to be in a home and in an environment that they're comfortable, that don't really need people to be there every day or at certain places. They're not going to do well in the new world order, I'm afraid. And that's kind of kicks off today's program evaluation. And that's what's about. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's well. I see our time is, let's see, we've got 8. Who are we missing this morning? There comes Blair. I'm gonna check the chat. Let me pause my video and check the chat here. Tradition. Yeah, Jamaica says tradition, laugh out loud. Yeah. Yeah, we do things because we've always done them. That's one of the terms we're going to explore today is UCP, usual customary practice. We don't evaluate things. There's Tim. All right. We don't evaluate things and we just do them because we've always done them. That is kind of the kickoff to program evaluation that we'll get to in a minute, well, a few minutes, is we don't really evaluate things in organizations. We just do them because we always did them. Tradition. We refer to those in the business of organizations as UCP, usual customary practices. And we hide behind those. Well, I did the right thing. Well, it didn't work. It's not the right thing. Well, I did the right thing. I don't understand why it didn't work. Well, if it didn't work, it's not the right thing. The right thing means something that works. And we have to evaluate things on the basis of disciplined inquiry. And that's what we've been doing all semester, is learning how to do disciplined inquiry. There are rules. There's rules for qualitative. There's rules for quantitative. And we put those together in a mixed method design, and that's how we do program evaluation. And 95% of what you will be doing as an organizational leader or an organizational consultant is program evaluation. What's working and what's not working. Now, you know that you won't ever get a call to come and just admire an organization that's working well. Why and when do people call consultants? When things aren't working. But you can't take, and what they'll say is, we don't understand why it's not working. We've been doing the right things. No, you've been doing the usual customary practices. Back to Arger's double loop. Do you know what you're doing is working? You just, it's giving Jamaica water and expecting him to fly because we saw birds flying, because that's what we've always done. And we've incorrectly found a correlation that's not really there. And that's what program evaluation is. It's putting together everything that hopefully we've learned this semester, and how to then in a systematic manner do we go through that. And we'll talk about that today. But first this morning, again, welcome. What I want to talk to you about is 3 weeks when we do our final presentations. I want to make sure that we're clear on what is due to us, what that PowerPoint's going to look like. So let me first share my screen, and again, welcome. Let me share my screen and go to that document. So here's what our PowerPoint framework or template is going to look like. The introduction. What is the problem that I'm seeking to address, and why is it important? This is what in the business we call the hook. You can even Google it. Why is it important? Why is it of interest? Why do we need? Why? What has captured our interest and our time and attention? What is the problem, and why is that problem important? This is where you really make your initial. It's okay to make your initial assumptions at this level. That's what our hypothesis is. Remember, what's an hypothesis? It's a stupid, wild ass guess, swag. But that leads us to our research questions, and then we start our literature review, and we start with our theoretical framework. It's one of these 5. Now, this is the tree that everything branches off of. For example, if y'all learned about Peter Senge, well, that's Getzell's Google social systems model. Or Collins, again, social system. Double loop, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Maslow, hierarchy of needs. That's what Candace and I were starting this conversation about. Hierarchy of needs. Safety, security, being at home. In times of a pandemic, that's a rational response, wanting to be at home. And that's what Maslow tells us. Why are we, that's kind of the central topic or theme of human existence is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Safety, security, be at home in times of trouble. Why are we ignoring that institutionally? That's been a constant, for the last century, that's been a constant. How do we not know that? Hertzberg 2-factor theory, satisfaction, job satisfaction. That's what, it's about people. Organizations are about people, process, and product. Let me say that again. Organizations, what is it? Define an organization? People, process, and product. That's what an organization is. Hertzberg speaks to job satisfaction. And he says they are not a continuum. They're 2 different factors. The things that make you stay are not the same things that make you go. So any job satisfaction literature that you look at all leads back to Hertzberg. That's why when we're doing satisfaction surveys, we can't do it on a Likert 5-point scale. 4 points. Agree and disagree are 2 different things. They are not a continuum in terms of satisfaction. The things that make you stay are not the things that make you go. That was back to one of our case studies where they used a center column. Can't use a center column. There is no undecided. You're either satisfied or you're not. This is not a continuum. That's what Hertzberg teaches us. He called them motivators and hygienes. We refer to them as satisfiers and dissatisfiers. And then Lewin's change theory, which says we have to unfreeze, move, and refreeze. That it's not just a simple process of we want to change. We have to unfreeze what we're doing. That means, you know, the fellow that went to the doctor and said, you know, when I move my arm like this, it hurts. And the doctor says, well, quit it. Don't move your arm like that. You know, you got to quit what you're doing. That unfreezing. You got to stop what you're doing. You got to move and do something new. So which of these, the literature that these lead you to, even in more modern times, that you've covered in your first 4 or 5 classes, a lot of these organizations, they all lead back to these. And then what is your problem you're trying to solve? The potential solutions from the literature. You do your literature review on the problem. Again, we'll go back to a school example. Problem is kids can't read. We've determined that it's a reading fluency problem because they can't speak English. We know that the potential solution, that's a phonics program. And we researched phonics programs that have worked in a school that looks like ours. Methodology, choose one. We're going to do mixed methodology. You have to do that, and in disciplined inquiry, if you're going to do program evaluation, if you're going to work in organizations, you have to do mixed methodology. You have to have both. If not, you've only looked at half the problem. Convergent design, we collect qualitative and quantitative data separately, and then we compare them to see if they match. Back to one of our case studies. If they don't match, we got a problem. And in our case study, it was with our instrument and our quantitative. And remember, when we're doing survey work, even if it's quantitative, the mode is what counts. We don't average the scores together. Average means nothing. It's how many responded, which is the mode. That's what matters. When we're doing survey work for opinion, averages don't matter. You know, select the proper measure of central tendency, and that would be mode. These are things that we've learned along the way. This is how we apply those things. Or we use an explanatory design like David and I have been working on the last couple of days. David's doing a great job on an explanatory design where he collected qualitative information first, found the themes, and then those themes are what he designed his quantitative questions to be surveyed from. And that explanatory design, you can do it either way. You can collect quantitative to inform your qualitative follow-up questions, or you can do it the opposite way. But explanatory, we use one to inform us, and then we go in that direction. Again, we do not do exploratory design as a consultant or as a leader when we're doing action research in actual real organizations. Why? Because it's theoretical work. It's hypothetical, theoretical, philosophical. It is a paper argument. We're working in the real, not the hypothetical. So in action research, we do not use exploratory design. And then you will present the qualitative and quantitative projects, and then you will have a slide that simply says findings and recommendations. It doesn't have to go any further than that at the proposal stage. And then you will have a slide that says action plan / project delivery. And it just says that you will do that once you have done these through your methodology. You will, the 4 and 5 will be filled in when you do your final presentation. So that's how this will go next week. Again, you simply stop after 3 and you have a slide that says 4 and a slide that says 5. Just that's all it has to say, because you're not there yet, but you will be there. But you have to tell us that you know that that's what comes next. Now, we have to be real careful here at recommendations. And this is, I'll stop my share for a minute here so I can see. Now this, if everybody needs to hear this, but most specifically, David needs to hear this. David and I have been working the last couple of days. And He's to the point where hopefully pretty soon he can collect his quantitative data through a survey that he's built that I've helped him with in Qualtrics. Now, what we have to be careful of, and I'm using David as an example because I've been working with him most recently. We have to be careful that we don't have an eye down the road to 4 and 5, our recommendations and our plan, before we collect our data. And what that means is we can't be a solution hunting a problem. You remember the case of wine case study when a previous consultant had come in, and guess what? She found what she normally does. Surprise, surprise. And she left him, said, you need an organizational chart. Everybody that worked in the organization could rode to work in one car. How do you need how does an organizational plan fix that? But that's what she did. And so you got to be careful that whatever you are selling is not, oh, surprise, surprise, I found that you need exactly what I sell. That goes back to the old gag back from the 40s and 50s. Y'all are too young to remember. The old gag was the traveling door-to-door salesman that sold vacuum cleaners. And when the lady opened the door to her home, what would he do? He'd throw a big throw a big pile of dirt in the house, just toss it in, and oh, I've got your solution right here with me. This new handy dandy vacuum cleaner. That's what we do. We're a solution hunting a problem. We've got your solution. Guess what? That's your problem. We have to be careful not to say I can, to find what we do or what we think works best, or be closed-minded as to what the data really tells us. And that's one of the reasons why I tell you, your job is simply to do the recommendations and whatever the deliverable action plan is and hand it to them. Don't get into the implementation phase. And there's 2 reasons why is you're trying to graduate from this program. That's our goal here, is to get you through this program. And we can't stand around and wait and that be dependent upon whether the program gets put in place that you suggested or the action plan be a part of that. Your job ends when you hand the organization your deliverable, which is, here's the plan you need, here's the recommendations, here's the plan that goes with that. Bye. If you're looking at how easy or hard it would be to implement, that will influence your recommendations and action plan. In real life action research is what we're doing. And so you got to be careful that you don't let that bleed in. And what happens a lot of times, and I see this quite frequently, is they've gone through all the steps of the data and they've collected it, but then their recommendations don't match their data. The recommendations, again, match what they want to do or what they can do, or maybe even what the organization wants to, and there's a disconnect. They go through all the steps and then do something different. Wait, what? When I was in the deputy in the largest school district in the state, was the deputy superintendent, one of my areas that I had to be involved in was there's 2 sides of the aisle in school districts. There's auxiliary and discipline, all that stuff. And then there's the academic side. Well, I was in charge. My job previous to that, I was in charge of the other side, of what we know as the dark side of the business, the operations piece. And one of the things that I did is I built a database decision matrix of that in order to spend money, and it had 10 variables in it. It was an algorithm that when somebody brought something to the district and said, we want to sell you this program, all right, we're going to work through to see if we should be spending our money on this. How many, if it was an academic program, how many standard deviations of gain can we expect to see? 2, if it was less than 1, if it's up to 2, all those, how much it costs, what funds could be used, how many people it took. All those things are in that algorithm. And I was working with a doctoral group out at the airport for Gardner Webb. That's before we even had the Charlotte campus. In LS in leadership, I was working with a doctoral group, teaching them methodology, and I was sharing this with them, this algorithm that is specific to schools. And one of the fellows raised his hand and said, "We need an 11th in there." I said, "Well, what would that would be?" He said, "Well, if you work through all 10 and it doesn't select the program that you wanted to buy, you need to have another one where you can just pick the one you wanted." I said, "But John, if we're just going to pick the one we want, why would we go through all 10 of these steps of basically program evaluation? Why would we go through all of this if we're just going to pick the one we want?" "Well, we do all that just for the public so we can have some cover, so to pick the things that we want." Well, then that means you're ignoring the data along the way, and picking what you want. You might as well pick what you want to start with. Yeah, but I want the political cover of making it look like that I've gone through a process. And that's what we have to be careful of in disciplined inquiry. We have to go where the data tells us, and we write the recommendations, and out of the recommendation, the action plan based on what our data told us. And that's the disconnect, people, that I see a lot of times in all disciplines, whether it's in School of Business, whether it's in curriculum instruction, whether it's in leadership, whether it's in organizational leadership. Those are the ones that I come in contact with most frequently, especially in business school. As I teach classes in methodology, is we did all the right things and we got all the data together, and then all of a sudden we take a hard left turn and our recommendations don't match our data. We find what we wanted to find, or we find what we can do best going forward, or what the organization wants to do. That's not disciplined inquiry. That's a solution hunting a problem. This is what, I sell you organizational charts. So I'm going to find that your problem is organization. You need an organizational chart. And as we know from that case study, A Case of Wine, that was of zero value to that organization. But that's what the that's what the consultant sold them, because that's what they had to sell. It's the vacuum cleaner of organizations, to mix metaphors here. And so we get all the way down. Here's our data, here's our methodology, here's what we found, here's our recommendations based on what we found, not on what we wanted to find, or what we were hoping to find, or what would be easiest, what we've got to sell. And so remembering, just like with David, when David gives these people the plan, he's done DEOL. Now, if he chooses to work with them further, that's okay. But that's the end of it for the consultant person. That's the end. Now, if your consultancy includes implementation and doing that's fine. But that's not part of what we're doing here. We can't everybody can't. A lot of times you have no control over whether it gets implemented or not. And so we can't make, that's why we have to cut that off for our purposes. We don't have to go in, well, all right, we implemented this and here's the results. No. In real life, if we were a leader in the organization, we'd be interested. But for the purpose of discipline inquiry and what we're doing, we're done when we hand them the plan. All right, what does your quantitative and qualitative data projects look like? Let me share my screen. We have those as well in our shell. And so your qualitative evaluation, it tells you right here everything. And again, what you need to do, project. You just read through this. The candidate will write a 2 to 3 page expository narrative describing the tool or strategy associated with his selected data kind, exploring his history. So this is your lit review. And this will go back up top, and you just simply, you just copy and paste it, you just, you tell us in a slide what you did, and this is the documentation for what you did. You write a 2 or 3 page, exploring the history of the methodology that you pick, and that's in Merriam, articulating its strengths and limitations, arguing why the data kind and selected collection analysis promises to be useful. And you cite 5 sources, and they're all right there in Merriam, so you could do that. And so that's what it is. And then for your quantitative, same thing, 2 to 3 expository narrative. That is the actual lit review that you did. Now you're going to need this at the end in your final presentation, and you will already have it. You will have your lit review on your theoretical framework. You'll have your lit review on your methodology. It will be done. You just put it together at the end in one document, and it will go right in your final report. It will be done. And so the goal in this course is the majority of your final project is done, in future tense here, and then it's in past tense when you come to your final defense. Now, again, theoretically, what you're doing is a proposal. You haven't done it yet, but in action research, many of you already collected your data. That's fine. But when you come to the proposal stage, you simply say, I'm going to do this. You don't say, I've already done this. You do that at the final one, even if you've already done it. At the proposal stage, you say, this is what I propose to do. I will know what it is. I will be there. Hopefully Dr. Hamilton will be there. And we may have the dean or an associate dean or whatever that will come to see these things. They're open. Your proposals are open to the public. This is standard doctoral format all over the world. Again, all doctorates have an element of proposal defense and have an element of disciplined inquiry. Ours is action research. Some is theoretical, some is exploratory, but this is doctoral programs. It's what a doctorate is. There is a proposal defense, final defense. So this is the standard that everybody does. Everybody's done this in DEOL from the beginning of time. And so as the final project is going through a slight modification right now due to SAC's 5-year review, there's nothing wrong with what has been being done. We've done this methodology for the last 3 years, 3 or 4 years we've done this. But so we have changed as SAC standards have changed, and as accreditation has changed, we've had to change to stay with them, and they do change. Standards, accreditation changes all the time, and we just simply change to stay up with that. The good thing is we were ahead of this change because we read the standards and knew what was coming. So 4 years ago or so, we made these changes. That's when I was brought on board as the methodologist to make these changes. I have taught this class the same way for the last 4 years. When SACs came in, they said, yeah, do that, what he's doing. Well, I read your standards. That's what methodologists do. And so we've done this for the last 4 years, been very successful. The DEOL program, everybody's happy. Our accreditation standards have, status has stayed solid. We're getting some national recognition. Pepperdine did a recent visit. We've been partnering with Vanderbilt for the last year to make our program look more like Vanderbilt's. And then Pepperdine is kind of the gold standard, but they've done a recent on-campus visit with us. And so, but we've kind of standardized what's going on in the industry right now is organizational leadership programs like the one at Michigan State, to name another one, are kind of going through a standardization in SACs, so that they kind of all look the same. And so the good thing is we were 4 years ahead on that, and so we're right where we need to be. There was no changes suggested in methodology or in this course or this sequence. There's a couple that have changed that are coming down the line in the a couple programmatic things, but they won't affect you, so there's no need to get into those this morning. But the methodology will not change because I had already aligned it with what was going on at Vanderbilt. So that's where we are. That's what we've done. That's what we do. You know where you are, and so you can kind of plug and play. You've got an extra week. We'll meet again in 3 weeks for your presentations. We will do them all in a day. You will have 30 minutes and then questions. I don't anticipate anybody will join us. If they do, that's fine. I know you know the answers to the questions as you work through these. I know that you will do that. You will be able to handle any questions that you have. The only questions will be generally from me because nobody wants to do methodology. Let me take this call quickly. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I needed to take that call. I'm checking on fellow that does some work for me. He's had COVID. He's doing better though. All right, so but again, most people who come in are not who, you know, everybody runs from methodology, and so I don't anticipate there'll be any questions, but you know, could be. All right, so I'm going to pause. I only ran 2 minutes long on that one. I like Jamaica's pullover this morning. And so questions that you have for me, I got my little coaster here this morning. Questions you have for me about the expectation in 3 weeks. Remember, it's a PowerPoint, big ideas. You don't have to get real deep, but just, you know, address the prompt in each of your slides. Now, the limit is 20. 20 slides is your limit. And don't have a lot of small print. Big ideas. And then your limit at your final presentation, because you're going to explore your recommendations and your action plan deliverables, your limit at the final will be 30. But the limit on this one is 20. That's standard across the world. At a proposal defense is 20 slides. You get 20 slides. And we want big ideas on those slides. We don't want little small stuff where you've crammed everything that, you know, don't put your whole lit review on the slide in you know, 12-point font that, you know, you'd have to be with your eye on the screen to see it. We want the big ideas here. What did you learn? Big ideas. Questions you have for me. Are there any examples? No. No examples. I will send you one though. But now, you know, we use Monica's from the summer. Let me pull it up right fast. I will send you this one via email, but no, I can't put those. I can't put those in the class shell. You're trying to get me to lose my job here this morning. Let me share my screen. this is the one I'll send you. We have gotten permission to use it through the actual author and the university, but we can't post it in a shell. It is proprietary work. So let me see. Okay, so here's the written report that Monica did for the executive summary, where she wrote it all out. You see the review of literature, problem, methodology, her research design. This is what it looks like when you write it all together at your final. When you write it out narratively, here's her results and initial findings, discussion, and then she had her deliverables. Here's her deliverable to her partnering organization. Her action plan is right. So she just wrote it out. That's what it looks like in the end when you put it all together. You can put it together now and write it out in long form if you want to. So that's what it looks like long form. And let's see. Surely. I'll close that. Let me go back here. Here we go. So background, purpose, scope and approach, outcome data, lit review, action plan, risk and constraints, quality assurance plan, areas for future studies, bibliography, and questions. And so this is the short form of what she did. But again, what for your purposes, I'll send you the narrative part. But you can see how she did the big ideas. Again, this is 15 slides. This is the short form that she did. But you should follow the narrative form. But again, we want to see, again, nobody's trying to hide anything from you. But again, these should be the topics of each of your slides. Introduction, we'll give you 2 for that. Lit review, you can kind of work through and see where your 20 would be. Right here are your 20 slides. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And you can add a couple here, and then these would be your last 2. That's 19 and 20. So you can kind of see where your slides would be. These would be your big titles. Again, we don't release proposals because we have the risk since these can't go and turn it in, we risk plagiarism, and that's a no-no everywhere. We actually had a case yesterday where somebody copped somebody's in LS, copped their proposal. The introductory chapter of the dissertation, it was 80% copied from somebody else's work. That happened yesterday in LS. We're not sure how she got a hold of it. It looked like she did an internet search. They were from the paper was from Walden University. They must post theirs online, which is a no-no. We don't, these are never posted online. They're never to be, they're all proprietary, but somehow she got somebody's dissertation from Walden and copied it. And so you run the risk, intentionally or not, if we give you stuff, we run the risk of there being an issue of plagiarism. And so Monica, we will let you look at Monica's short form, but again, yours is going to be longer. It's going to follow my format. We pulled a short form, and what that means is I took and edited it down to things that you might not know. Obviously, there was more than just 12 slides in her final, but it had proprietary things in it. But if you here are things that the questions that students usually ask me at the end, I don't know what a quality assurance plan is. I don't know this, and so that's what that's for. But her narrative, you can see her narrative that she had at this stage, the proposal stage. You can see it, but we can't give you a slideshow of a one because that's cheating in our business. We can't allow that to happen. Again, we have our ethical concern that you have to do original work, and it can't copy somebody else's work, although the format's the same the world over. We go back to that ethical piece that we've talked about from the very first day, the very first morning, and that's also chapter 2 in Royce that we're going to talk about today. Is ethical behavior in what we do, and a lot of times it's just on ourselves to do that until we get caught, and then you know how that goes. It's all fun and games till somebody gets their eye put out, and then then it doesn't go well. Other questions you have for me? I will send Monica's to everybody when we get through today. But again, it's just the narrative. All right, so let's focus. Yes.
On the data analysis project Dropbox, there is a link for a qualitative data project and a link for a quantitative data project, and then the final PowerPoint presentation.
Mm-hmm.
So do both of the narrative write-ups go in the qualitative and the quantitative?
Yeah. You got to do that now. You need to write those up now so you'll have them. And that's what I covered this morning. So the three things the three things that are due in 3 weeks are your slideshow. Again, back to what's the slideshow look like, and again, I put it in narrative form. This is what your 20 slides will look like, and then that's due, and you simply, here you simply say on this qualitative data project, and you big ideas from what you've learned, a couple of sentences there, but then you actually have to write these 2, and here again is the guide for those.
Okay, so Dr. Lamb,
these documents are in your shell. I beg your pardon?
I was just going to say, I had started writing the whole thing, like the introduction and all those different pieces, but I don't have to turn those pieces into you. That's what you're saying now, just the qualitative and the quantitative pieces of that.
Now, that is correct.
Okay.
Just those 2 and what you're going to do. You don't, but now you know that by the end, you'll have to write those. They will be a part of what you do. Again, at the end, you'll have that piece. But yes, you will need that for your final. At the proposal stage, you don't have to You know, you just have to have the big ideas at the proposal stage. You flesh it out over, you know, once your data collection comes along. And people say, well, I can go ahead and write my introduction now and all that. Well, you can. And that's not a bad practice. And if you can write it now, that is fine. But the traditional doctoral requirement, all that stuff's not due until the end. You know, we don't require you to have everything completely fleshed out at this point because you know, theoretically, you've not collected your data yet. You're not at that point. And you say, well, you know, how does data collection influence my introduction? It does. It will. It can. Doesn't always. But again, we have to make sure that we don't preordain what we're going to find. We find what we find, good, bad. Data has no value. It's not good or bad. It just is. And that's what again, we risk thumping into the data, making it come out to be what we want it to be, or what will be handy for us. Again, usual customary practices. That's why organizations fail. They sometimes even acknowledge their data, but they just don't want to act on it. And that leads me to my sermon on qualitative again. Again, full disclosure, I'm a quantitative person. But the biggest issue I see in action research, in real life organizational work, is we ignore qualitative data. We think, well, that's just somebody's opinion, or I don't have enough, or is that really data? That's not data. But that's what qualitative is. That's what qualitative is. And it has value. It has strength. It has efficacy. Just because it's not a number from a validated measure from a standardized scale doesn't mean it's not data. And the other thing is, we could always have more, always. And what we run the risk of is well, that's just this group's opinion. You know, I need more people. Well, in organizations, that group is what matters. And that's one of the themes of a couple of our case studies. We had the data on Jasmine. Remember our last case study? Well, we don't have very much, but we had everybody that worked in that 12-person unit. We had data from all of them. Would it matter what somebody over in the shipping department thought of Jasmine? No. Again, population and sample. That was the entire population of her department that she came in contact with. Why would it matter what somebody in another department thought about Jasmine or in another organization? We had feedback, we had data from everybody that was in the entire population of that came in contact with Jasmine in that work environment. We didn't just sample one or two of them. We asked everybody, all 12 of them. I don't know how we could ask them again, maybe, but then you run the risk of alienating people. But just because it didn't come back positive doesn't mean that we did something wrong or that we need to ask somebody else what they think. For the purposes of that, we had data about how she interacted with her division, the people that work for her every day. And we had information, we had data from all 12 of them. That it wasn't positive doesn't mean that we did it wrong or bad or that we need more. We had what we needed. But we refuse, if it doesn't come out like we think it ought to, or if it's not like, if it doesn't show us in a good light, then it's not really data, or we need more. That's the common complaint. If we need more. If we don't like what the data tells us, we need more. No, you have enough. It's incumbent upon you to act upon that now. Now, the thing that about Jasmine, if we remember the difference between Jasmine and John, we had data on John, we had qualitative and quantitative on John, and we had data on Jasmine, which was qualitative. If we were the organization person, organization leader that was directly responsible for those two people, both of them were ill-suited for their jobs. Neither one of them were doing, were suited for their jobs. One of them, I would advocate that we would have to let go. That would be John. The other one, we'll see if we can find something else in the organization for her, or maybe try to retrain her. And the difference being ethical concern. John was an unethical person. He was running his own little kingdom over there. He had hijacked the goals of the organization and was doing his own thing. He was punishing his enemies and rewarding his friends. He had perverted the organizational mission and vision into his own little kingdom. You can't, that's unethical behavior. You can't live with that in an organization. I can't watch you every day to make sure that you're not doing something like that. And that's always the tip of the iceberg. That's why we have sexual harassment and misconduct. That's why we have money missing and misspent and gone. Is from unethical behavior. The part we can see is never the worst part. Unethical people don't say, well, I'm going to be unethical over here, but I'll do the right thing. I won't do all this bad stuff over here. No, that's not the way it works. Now, Jasmine was not an unethical person. Jasmine was not suited for customer service. That's, people say, well, what's the difference here? It's very simple. Jasmine was not trying to hijack the organization goals, mission, vision for her own purposes. She simply wasn't suited for customer service. Now, we could argue whether we can move her somewhere else in the organization or try to spend the time and money to train her. But there was no consideration that Jasmine is a bad person. We got to let her go. John's a bad person. He's hijacked your organization. It's going to be a pay me now or pay me later with John. Trust me, down the road, you're going to find out that the things you saw were only the tip of the iceberg on the stuff that John's doing, because he's proven to be an unethical person. He's not coming to work every day to advance the organization. He's coming every day to carve out a kingdom for John. And John, people like that they have no filter. They have no limits. They know no boundaries. You can't have people like that in leadership positions in your organization. You just can't. It will not end well for you. Every day, all of us sports nuts that are here on the screen today. Two more scandals this week in the NBA about bad behavior and in the leadership of two more teams. With the Phoenix Suns, the president, the owner, his bad behavior, and then the people that told on him is the owner's wife is sending them threatening emails, basically, intimidate them to shut up. And then what's the other team where the president had to resign? Portland. So Portland and Phoenix this week, bad behavior, unethical behavior, misogyny, racism, sexual harassment, fill in the blank. It's the same old song. People that know no boundaries. It's just, people that are arrogant and hateful and running their own little show inside organizations. They become toxic. I can do whatever I want to do, kind of thing. It becomes toxic environments. And as we peel back the layers of the onion, it gets worse. It gets worse. It gets worse. But the root of the problem is unethical behavior. That's why ethics, we talked about it to begin with. When we move through program evaluation this morning, It all comes back to ethical behavior. Why do you think I posted a document for you, 10 ways to cheat using data? Don't do this. Ethical concern. That's what destroys organizations. I can tell you right now, refusing to adapt to change, ignoring your data, doing what you always did. These are all functions of unethical behavior as well. But it gets toxic. It creates a toxic environment in the workplace. And what have we found through the Great Resignation here? People aren't going to put up with this anymore. You can't keep employees. They'll go somewhere else. I need safety and security. I don't need a toxic environment. I can't live and work in a place that causes me this kind of emotional distress and is threatening to me physically, emotionally, mentally. People are losing good employees everywhere. They just won't put up with this anymore. They shouldn't have ever put up with it. This is the dark side of capitalism. This is the dark side, where we're only driven by profit, and not understanding the organizations are just made up of people. But the profit motive, I must make every dollar that I can make. I must, burn the back of the house to keep the front of the house warm. And organizations all of a sudden just, it's like, was it Ernest Hemingway when he was asked how he went bankrupt? He said, gradually, then suddenly. And that's how organizations decline, gradually. And then all of a sudden they just fall through their own weight. And as we have found, there's no organizations too big to fail from unethical behavior, refusing to change, ignoring the obvious, gaslighting people that we're doing the right thing. So usual customary practices is a form of gaslighting. Everybody knows what gaslighting is, I'm assuming. That's when you ignore the obvious and you argue that what I saw is not what I saw, or that I'm wrong. And so usual customary practices is a notion that we're doing the right thing because we've always done it. It's the right thing. Ignoring whether it worked or not, or the data, but getting everybody to believe or be convinced that I'm doing the right thing. The classic case of gaslighting in American capitalism, well, actually it was supposed to be a nonprofit, but it is a form of capitalism, was the giant Texas energy concern known as Enron. Everybody knows the story of Enron. There's a movie, a book called The Smartest Guys in the Room. They were stealing the money right and left. I mean, billions every year. And they kept telling people, debt doesn't matter. We have a new form, we have developed a new financial model. Everybody said, but corporations can't, will eventually crash under the weight of their debt. No, they won't. We have a new financial model. And the executives were taking hundreds of thousands of dollars out of a public energy, which is, supposed to be a nonprofit. Executives were taking millions of dollars, hundreds of millions. What was it? Ken Lay, the guy that died in prison, he took 1 year, his salary and bonuses was $150 million. Let me say that again. 1 year, he took $150 million out of a public utility company as salary and bonus. And when everybody said, this is not sustainable, your debt is more than your assets. You can't operate this way. Your outgo can't be more than your income. You will crash under the weight of your debt. That's the way finance. We have a new model of finance, and for years told people we don't have to go by the old rules. Gaslighting, usual customary practice. What happened to Enron? They crashed. They went to prison. Some of them did. All of them should have done. What happened to Wall Street with the debt? All the banks absconded with the money. The Big Short, movie that was made out of that. The government had to come in and bail them out, and those people all slid off, into the woodwork. But that won't happen. This kind of financial chicanery and unethical behavior happens, but rarely do you not have to go to prison over this kind of stuff, because the money's always a part of it. The bad behavior, misogyny, sexual harassment, racism, it's all one big nasty mess, but it all goes back to your ethical concern. And so that's the piece of this that we have to understand as we begin to undertake program evaluation and we try to put together everything that we've learned. I want to touch upon super crunchers. That was your outside reading book, and that was on our agenda to cover today. And that's where super crunchers comes in. Keeping up with the quants is more about a how-to guide for practical application of action research on the quantitative side. But super crunchers was kind of it's 14 years old, and you say, well, Deol, that's not modern enough. But it foretold the future of what was going to happen. It was the first book written for the common person that is written. If you've listened to it on tape, it's actually hilarious to listen to him tell the story. But it's a good read. But it's also exposes us to the dark side of how data analytics is being used against us and how it's been abused. It wasn't so bad in 2007 when he wrote this, 2006, but now we're beginning to see the dark side of marketing and analysis, where targeted messaging and dog whistles and coded language and those kinds of unethical things are happening with our data now. We're manipulating data and the analytics of it now we're using the technical part of it properly, but then as an outcome, we're using it. We're using it in an unethical manner to target message things that aren't true to people who will respond emotionally. And we're using it to take advantage of people's buying patterns. We're using it to take advantage of how we market information. We have propaganda channels on TV, and as I was talking about last time on our internet, that are not real news organizations. They are just propaganda channels that have a constant theme. And their news is not even real. Sometimes it's just completely made up, or it's completely misinterpreted, but it's messaging. All this goes back to data analytics, how we are abusing in absence of ethics. This is what happens. Super Crunchers was written in fairly neutral tone, or maybe a positive tone, about the benefits of this, but unfortunately, over the last decade, starting with Cambridge Analytica and the election of 2015 or 16, the 16 election, we can see how people can use what would normally be considered something innocuous as data, which was collected in terms of what people consumed, in order to be able to design messages that weren't true, but that would elicit responses. I mean, the whole notion of Cambridge Analytica was to deceive. They used they used proper methodology to collect their data, but they did it for the purpose of deception. And so they had no ethical concern. They were trying to elicit an outcome to try to get people to vote for one political party and not the other. They had no compunction about putting out false information or lying or doing whatever. But the trick was what information to put out. And that's where the technical piece came in that they went out and used clinical trials and regression and large, collected large amounts of data and said, these are the things that people are concerned about. Well, how do we message those people falsely to trigger them to go and vote the way we want them to vote? And simply, that's all they did. That they used standard technology or standard methodology to collect their data and analyze it, and said, this is what people are afraid of. And that's what they were doing. What are people afraid of? Back to the movie Irresistible, a movie about politics, a local mayor race in Wisconsin. It's a comedy, but it's a dark comedy with Steve Carell. And so these two political consultants, bring all this high-powered millions of dollars to this little mayor's race in a town of 200 people in rural Wisconsin. But the most telling thing about the whole movie, and I'm not a big movie watcher, I watched it because of the subject matter, but the most telling thing was she said she was the Republican consultant and he was the Democratic one. And the Republican said, I will get more votes with fear than you'll get with shame. Trying to, so the notion here is one political party tries to drive their voting base with fear. This is a bad thing that's going to happen to you if you don't vote for us. While the other, they try to drive the vote with shame. We ought to be doing better. You need to come out and support us because we've not done the right thing and we need to do the right thing. And so it's basically a battle of good versus evil, where we'll scare the voter base, we'll terrorize them, we'll make them afraid not to vote for us because if we don't, these bad things are going to happen. That goes back, I guess the first political campaign that used that was back during the Reagan era, the caucus where they did the Willie Horton ad, which is famous throughout the world. Anybody want to expound on the Willie Horton ad? Anybody know what that was? It was the first time it was ever used in politics. It was a watershed moment. Anybody know? Anybody know the Willie Horton ad? The Willie Horton ad was released and it was directed at the northeastern states, which if people don't know, Boston's probably the most racist town in America. It's kind of the hub of New England. And so when Mike Dukakis ran, I think he ran against, was that Bush won? He ran against Bush. Bush won, the older Bush. When the Republican Party, Lee Atwater, their political consultant, which would be the role of the woman in the movie. But anyway, the political consultant, Lee Atwater, they did a campaign ad where they showed a guy, an African-American man named Willie Horton, who was out on work release or parole. Dukakis had done in order to alleviate, he was from one of the northeastern states. In order to alleviate prison overcrowding, they let out some nonviolent offenders. And Willie Horton was one of those, and he raped and killed a woman. And they showed Willie Horton's picture that if you vote for the Democrats, this is what's going to happen. They're going to let black people out to rape and pillage in our community and kill people. I don't mean that they did this discreetly. I mean, that was the ad. You can dial it up on Google. There it is. Jamaica has put up the link to that. That's what they did. And guess what happened? The caucus even lost his home state because, again, driven by fear. And that was the watershed moment in American politics. And so the Republican Party, they whip up their voter base on fear. Going to take your guns. We're going to take your guns. We're going to teach critical race in your schools. They're going to take your jobs. You know, they're going to come over the wall and get what you got. It's always they, them, code words. And they, raise taxes. Going to give all your money away. They're going to tax you. They're going to give it to illegal aliens. They're going to, illegal immigrants. They're going to give them health care, and you aren't going to get it. And you're going to have to pay for it. Just a constant barrage of fear-driven stuff. That now the message is false, but those issues ring true with those voters, and that's the data collection piece. The data. That's what Cambridge Analytica does. What are the things that scare people? Look at their voting patterns, look at their buying patterns, look at all the things, the decisions they make in their life. What do they consume, their news, all that. What message can we send to them? Now, the message doesn't have to be true. The message doesn't have to be true. It just has to be resonant. So their data collection strategies are impeccable. It's just what they do with them that's despicable. And that's where the ethical piece comes in. Back to my original argument this morning. You collect your data, and your data takes you wherever it takes you. We don't preordain what we're going to do and hide behind collection or, use that for unethical purposes. That's always where that's the part where we fail. We go through all the right things, the ethical things in collecting our data. And then what we do with it after that, after chapter 3, basically, our findings, we write something completely different than what our data said. We again, solution hunting a problem. We feather our own nest, or we use that against people. That's where that ethical breakdown occurs in disciplined inquiry. And that's where that's the part we have to hammer home, that we've taught you all these things to use your powers for good and not for evil. I believe this is how I started this course. I'm going to teach you all these bad things so that you won't do them, and so that you will know when people are doing them to you. Going back to the 10 ways to cheat with data, and that will close our morning session here, and then we'll get to Royce. All this is context for what's coming up in Royce. So let me share my screen and go to that one. Let me remind you of this document, the 10 ways to cheat with data. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And that. Use an invalid measure or a validated measure incorrectly. Think of an example of that one from something that we've talked about or you've learned this semester, where we used an invalid measure. Remember any example of that from our case studies? Which of our case studies used an invalid measure? They used
a 5-point scale.
That is correct, the 5-point scale. We used an average, which we don't, we should be reporting mode. We used averages and we used a 5-point scale, so it didn't even when we reported the mode, how many in each of the columns, when we separated it out, it just looked like everything looked okay. It didn't match what our qualitative said because we used a validated measure incorrect. use it unreliable, using it unreliably. The classic example of that is they send a test to a school that's supposed to be, under lock and key for 2 weeks, and we get it out and make a study guide out of it. The rules are, it comes to your building, it stays under lock and key, and we give it on that day, and you're not supposed to open it up or look at them before then. This is a common manipulation. We don't follow the rules. We get an edge or an advantage from that. Using anecdotal information as validated data. Again, that's, give me an example of that in modern discourse, where we use anecdotal information as validated data. We act like that this has been validated in some way. Now, understanding, this is different than qualitative people's opinion. This is when we're parading something that's anecdotal, but we're putting a number on it, claiming that it's real data, that it's been validated, that this was a scale, an accepted, validated scale that we used to get this, when it was just actually anecdotal information that we're trying to disguise it. We put a number on something that's not a real number. Give me an example of that in modern discourse. Somebody, anybody.
I mean, I don't know if this is the right answer, but I would think about like what people say on Facebook about the vaccine, or that you just take people's
words. They just, somebody on Facebook says 15% of the people that get vaccinated are sterilized. What does that, by putting that 15% on it, what does that lead people to imply? That it's a validated measure, that somebody in an authoritative position has done this research and has determined that this many people were sterilized by taking the vaccine. And putting a number on it makes it look real. That's what we're talking about, using anecdotal information, but representing it as validated number that they put in. We see it on social media all the time. 50% of the people that got vaccinated had side effects. Where's that number? Well, I just made it up, but that makes it real. If I believe it, that makes it real. We see that in social media. I'm glad to see that lately I've been seeing celebrity pitch. There was a time when we got rid of some of these really bad targeted fear ads to senior citizens. But the Trump administration allowed them to come back, and they're still back. And I'm hoping soon the Biden administration will address them again. Last week, I saw for the first time national discourse on these Social Security ads that Jimmy J.J. Walker is doing now, and Joe Namath is doing now, and a couple more celebrities that for these companies that are trying to sell senior citizen supplemental health insurance to supplement Medicare. And they're quoting all these numbers and figures that aren't real, that's just they made up. And and they're implying that they are helping you or that they're a part of the government, and they're neither. They're just trying to sell you insurance. In the fine print, it says that everything that the spokesperson said to you is untrue, but they use numbers. Again, social media and these infomercials use numbers on anecdotal things that they believe or trying to get you to believe that are not really from a validated measure. 15% of the people, believe it or not, 15% of the people who got vaccinated are not sterilized. I listened to a CDC doctor for the West Coast. He's based out of San Francisco this week. He said, there's not been one documented case of anybody dying from the vaccine or being sterilized from the vaccine. I would tend to want to believe the CDC on the West Coast. But now if you go on Facebook, we throw numbers on things to make them look valid. That implies validity. That number does that, and that's one of the things that we do. We take something that's just anecdotal, it's just opinion, throw a number on it at random, and people believe it's true. Choosing your source of data, cherry picking the data that supports your narrative and ignoring that doesn't. We really have, going someplace where we know they feel the same way, so we can make sure that we can imply that everybody feels this way. That's not represented, a population that's not representative of the larger, a sample that's not representative of the larger population. We have to be careful all the time to make sure we don't hit those outliers. And so when we do, we don't have to do it for our purposes very much. But we have to because we are working with convenience samples. One particular organization, we're doing ad hoc internal studies. And so we're not trying to generalize to a larger population. But but when we pull a sample, we also, and we're doing opinion work or survey work with them for their opinion. We have to make sure that if we are, that we didn't pull an outlier if we're trying to use that data for other parts of the organization. For example, we're going to use, or we have used a chi-square on Jonathan Davis' consultancy project. Jonathan is at Cleveland Community College, and we're doing a project he's doing a project there on trying to improve online virtual teaching. And so we can't use everybody, because everybody at the college that teaches across every department, we can't use everybody. So we did have to pull a sample to make it manageable in the time frame that he's got. We did pull a sample. So we have run a chi-square to make sure that the sample that he pulled from across the college, that sample is representative of the entire college. We had to do that for convenience sake. Jonathan don't want to be as old as I am by the time he finishes. He wants to finish on time. And we knew that trying to collect data from everybody at the college that teaches at a community college, and a lot of them, community colleges use a lot of adjuncts. They don't have a lot of full-time people. And the logistics of pulling all these people together was just basically impossible in the time frame that we had. Remember, we want to get in and want to get out. So we did pull a sample, but we got to make sure that sample is representative of everybody. And so we do chi-square, because we don't want to imply that the characteristics of this particular sample are the same as everybody else if we don't know that. We can't just assume that. But now, generally the work that we do, you say, well, it is a convenient sample. That's okay if the recommendations are just for that. But if you're doing a part of the organization that you're partnered with, and it speaks to other parts, then we're going to have to do chi-square. It's just that simple. We want to make sure that we haven't pulled, that we haven't claimed that these are the characteristics of this organization when we've only looked at a smaller part of the organization. That we can't assume that everybody else is the same as the group that we pulled, the sample that we pulled. And that's one of the things that we do is we cherry pick and we say everybody's this way. Everybody I know is like this. Well, you know, we have to be careful. For example, we can't, and this is where bias and ethics come in. We can't knowingly go someplace and talk to people and gather data from them and information, knowing that if we go to certain places, that we're going to get certain answers. Again, if I have insulted you, that was probably my intention, but I'll apologize up front. When we want to talk about UFOs, where do we go? If we want to get people who will give us data and information about UFOs, unidentified flying objects, where do we go? We go to the South. It's one that's amazing that the Deep South, UFOs only go to the Deep South. We go to the Deep South, rural, trailer park, white people. And everyone we ask has had an experience with a UFO. You know that. Now, is that true? Of course, it's not true that they've had an experience with UFO. But if we want, when we start that again, you know, when we want to get people afraid, and that's one of those things that we gin up. You know, it's crazy. I know this sounds crazy and incidental, but every election cycle we gin that stuff up again. Because there's a lot of people, those people across the Deep South that believe that there are aliens out there and that they're Democrats. I can't make this up. As crazy as this sounds. I mean that this is the kind of stuff that we're talking about. Something that is completely off the charts crazy. But there's a large segment of the population across the Deep South that firmly believe in UFOs. And if we want to know about them, we go and interview them so that we can gin that up on TV again. And we know that we're selecting that population, but again, we go to a population that we know that believes something that's not true for the purposes of collecting data and claim this is real for those purposes when we know it's not. You know. If you want to know more about, if you want to know quickly about UFOs, just Google, go to YouTube and let Neil deGrasse Tyson tell you about, you know, the foremost astronomer in the world explain UFOs to you. It takes about 1 minute for you to understand it's not a real thing. But we genuinely, I mean, as crazy as it is, we want that crazy boat. And that's the thing that motivates them. And so to make it real, we go and interview them. That again, we do things of that nature, knowing that they're going to tell us that, regardless of whether it's true or not, and that they firmly believe it. But we're trying to speak to them, choosing your source of data. Choosing a reporting system that preordains the outcome. The largest is comparative accountability in all forms of schooling, K-12, university, postgraduate, the whole deal. Comparative accountability speaks to who you get, not what you do with them. If you want to know what you did with them, you measure their growth. But in all forms of colleges, universities, community colleges, K-12, doesn't matter. The comparative accountability system preordains the outcome. We know the factors that influence kids' test scores or people's test scores all the way through. We know what those variables, what those independent variables are. We know what counts the most. Race counts 30%, mother's income, father's income, mother's education. That's 15, 30, 6. That's 60% of the kid's test score. That's 60% race, father's income, mother's education. So when we have kids who, hit the lottery, on those three, doesn't matter the kind of tests that we give them. When we do comparative accountability, we know who's going to come out on top on those. We know who's going to win in that case. Again, back to my wife, when she was over, the 15 years she was at the IB school over at Davidson College. Was a boutique magnet school. 240 brightest kids in Mecklenburg County. Most important person in the organization was the custodian. Just get the front door open every day. The scores walk right in. 99 percentile every time. You could have had them playing their Game Boy all day long. I'm sure there's something more modern than that now, but it wouldn't have mattered. It did not matter. But that was a system that was preordained. We knew the outcome before it started, that they were going to be at 99% every year in every tested subject, because they got to pick who that went to school there. And if a kid got in that couldn't do the work, that the IB curriculum, you don't modify the IB, you don't differentiate instruction at the IB school. If you can't do the work, what happens at the end of the first semester? They send you back to your home school. So, again, picking a system or an instrument or a reporting system that how it's going to be before you even start, and then claiming what a great school that is. No, they've got great students. If you want to know how good the school is, that's not the right reporting system. That's not the right measure. The right measure is growth. How much did the kid grow while he was in your school? Not, accountability is how smart were the kids that you got them and their background, race, and education and income. If you control for those, what did you do outside of that? Change the metric. The one that we've become most to understand nationally is unemployment. Unemployment rate no longer means how many people are out of work. It simply means how many people are getting employment benefits. And if we want to make that number look small, we simply limit their benefits, how long they get them and who can get them. That doesn't mean they've got a job. So the notion of record low unemployment is not true. Unemployment is how many people don't have a job. But we have defined unemployment rate. But we didn't tell everybody out in public this. So what does the John Q. Public walking down the street that doesn't know any better, what does he believe about the number of people who don't have a job? He believes that only 4% of the people in the United States don't have a job. This is where common sense, I guess, or qualitative data collection ought to kick in for some of these people. Only 4%, then you ought not know anybody. Theoretically, you ought not know anybody that's unemployed. How come you know half the people you know are unemployed if there's only 4% unemployment. No, the unemployment rate is 4%. And that's simply a measure of how many people are getting benefits. What happens after 30, 60, 90 days, according to which state you're in? What happens to your unemployment benefits? They go away. Does that mean you're no longer unemployed? No. But we have changed the metric without telling anybody and let them assume the definition of that metric to mislead them into believing that we're miracle workers. After the crash of 2008, the real unemployment rate in this country has never gotten below 20%, never. The real, how many people don't have jobs? We never recovered, even as great a job as President Obama did during his 8 years. We never got anywhere near back where we were before. And it's only gotten worse in the last, how many years since he's been out of office? It's only gotten worse. The true unemployment rate in this country right now is running about 30%. Now, you say, Dale, that can't be right. If we use the traditional definition, operational definition of employment is full-time work. How many people do you know work multiple part-time gigs in the gig economy that are just scraping to get by? How many people do you know that way? In the traditional sense, that's not being employed. Employment in the traditional sense, the metric that is that you worked a full-time job of 40 weeks and had benefits. How many people do you know work right at 37.5 hours, don't have benefits? Again, that's not the traditional definition of employment. And see, in order to be able to make a living wage, you have to actually be employed. 40 hours a week with benefits, and not just benefits from your employer, benefits, government benefits like unemployment insurance, Social Security, all of those things. So the real unemployment rate in this country, that doesn't mean that people aren't working, but the real unemployment rate's at 30%. Of people who either don't have any job, working gig economy, or working part-time without benefits, and are getting paid now, but later on, or especially if they have any health issues, are going to have to come up with that money that they're not putting away right now. They don't have health insurance. They don't have a savings plan. They don't have an IRA or 403 or retirement. None of those, when you're working gig economy, none of those things come. That's the traditional operational definition of employed and unemployment, conversely. But we have manipulated the notion of unemployment rate, and imply that only 4% of the people in the United States don't have a full-time job, which is completely untrue. Bias the survey, phrase questions subjectively, or instead of objectively, you understand that. Blame the victim. We blame the teachers for the failure of kids in school. When again, we know that 60% of the variance in the score has to do with race, education, income, that comes walking in the door every day. 10%, only 10% of the variance in the kids' score in a public school can be attributed to the teacher, but we blame, 100% of the success on them. Discredit the source of data. fake news. If you have no control, you just say it's not real. Even if the pictures, we had the largest inauguration in history in January of 17, although the pictures and everybody that was there said it was the smallest they'd ever seen. But we just say they lied. You don't believe your eyes. Do you believe your eyes or what I'm telling you? And all else fails, simply change the numbers. All right, we're going to break, and we'll get to questions now before we go to break. After break, Tim's got a question. We'll go to Royce. Yes, Tim.
Can you stay on for a second?
I can. All right, everybody. Let's see. I've got 20 till. I'll see you. Let's take a 10, and I'll see you back at 10:50. That'd be right. 10:50. Yes, Tim.
I'm sharing my screen. I made some changes to my final project
Okay.
based off like the proposal based off when we email.
Mhm.
And I just want to like kind of show you what I have going forward. Really the research questions and the quantitative and like what I'm planning to do for the quantitative and qualitative data is what I have a lot of questions, what I really want to get feedback on, because I have the problem, I have the importance, and I have the theoretical framework that I'm planning to use and like an explanation of why I'm planning to use this one. But based on the research questions, I know when we spoke in the beginning of the semester, it was like a how and then statement. Do these research questions, like, do they fit are they research questions?
Well, a research question has to lead to something data that we can collect. So let's look at the first one. How can the library increase the annual number of donors and dollars needed to overcome? All right, how can they increase the annual number of donors? All right, how can they? Well, again, that would lead us to our literature review on how to do that, and then the literature review would say to do X, Y, and Z. So yeah, that's a good one. Okay. What sustainable practices can you implement under yearly to increase the need gaps presented by the new budget? Yeah, you can do. Yeah, I don't like the wording of in their yearly activities to increase the need gaps presented by the new budget cuts. I would say on that one, we should say something like financial gaps. Is that, I mean, we're talking about money here. That should be financial gaps. Needs is a operational deficit. Needs might be people. It might be, that needs to be financial gaps presented by the new budget cuts.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we got to focus on, we're trying to get people to give us money.
Right.
That's the thing. We're not trying to get volunteers, give us time, give us, books or any of that. We have to be very specific here, that we're trying to get money. And that's why your research questions, your hypothesis can be broad. Your research questions have to zero in. What do we want? We want money. We don't want people to come bring us a load of lumber.
Right.
We're not looking for chattel in the business. Okay, how can the library get their message to the right people who will be interested in supporting the work the library does? We need to change Okay. We only need to change one word in that one.
Okay.
Instead of right, that needs to be appropriate.
Okay.
Right implies value, right, wrong, and then we'd have
Right,
to
right. That
define
makes
that.
sense. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
we can research all those, and we can. I mean, that drives our lit review right there, and then from our lit review, it tells us what we would need to do, and that's where we design our methodology. But back to, so yeah, those are exactly what we talked about. Now, you know, we understand the issue with giving. I've told you one of my personal friends is in the giving business, Woody Fish. He just retired. Well, a year ago he retired. But
Would you
Woody
mind
still,
connecting us?
yeah, I'll be glad to. Woody's no football coach. He was head coach at Gardner Webb. He actually
Okay.
coached Duke. But yes, while I'm thinking about it, I'm gonna do that right now.
Yes, sir.
Woody is he's a fundraising maven. I mean, he's done that. You know, Woody would tell you that people don't give to institutions, they give to people.
Right.
And that it's building the personal relationships that you have to go out and do. Now, I'll say this about Woody. Woody tries to focus on people in that older age bracket that have money.
Yep.
Rather than, now I'm sure he knows how to and could tell you how to. He does institutional, the big stuff. He tries to get the big donors. For what you're talking about, yeah, you would love to have a big donor, but really, and
Right.
I'm sure he could help you with this, how to get younger people who don't normally give, especially because of student loans, how to get smaller amounts from them and build a relationship over years of consistent giving. But Woody is the maven in this area. He knows all this stuff. And so while I'm thinking about it,
Yes, sir.
I am, let me move this out of the way.
I'm planning for the data part to do convergent because we have a CRM that pulls quantitative data, and then I'm also planning to send a survey so one part of the literature told me that the best time to get survey results is when you have a person's attention.
Yeah.
So the donors are used to getting like acknowledgement letters online from us. So at the bottom in the language, we also have click this link to take a survey, and we only send it to a person one time. We're able to track who, like if a person gives more than once a year, they will only get the opportunity to take the survey one time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm planning to take take the different data types and compare them to each other.
Yeah.
Then let that drive the recommendations.
Yeah. That's the way you do it. That's convergent design.
Yes, sir. And I have an idea about the quantitative data that I'm planning to pull, and it's like that tells a story. And I know I can pull it. I haven't gone in that far, but just to tell a story of of what our donor base looks like, and then for the qualitative, we can't use Qualtrics for the libraries. We have to use Microsoft Teams.
Yeah.
So I had to work with and also being an employer, I had to work with the library methodologist data there to create the survey that we put in the link. And these are the questions. And I collect statements. Well, for this, cat's out the bag. I started sending this already because it was important to get. This was the hardest data to pull.
Yeah.
I like bracket the statements. Like some people say I give because the library was essential in my research. Other people will say like my parents supported the libraries, and when I graduated, I wanted to start. So I'm that's what I'm planning to do for the qualitative data, and then I have the 2 last slides blank, like we talked about in the beginning of this video. But I just wanted to show you that to kind of get just to show you, because I know you will let me know if I'm going down the completely wrong path. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
No, you're right where you need to be. Again, you just got to work through the process. All right, so all right. So his name is Woody, Woody.
Yes, sir.
Fish, Fish, Woody Fish. I've just texted him to expect your call. Woody loves talking with everybody.
Yes.
Tell him to call me. He's already texted me back.
Yes, sir.
All right. So Woody's number
Yes.
is 704
704
974
974
3575.
704 974 3575.
704-974-3575. That is correct.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna save it right now.
Go ahead and give him a call.
Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead and call him now, and you can join us in class in a few minutes. Give Woody a call just to say thanks and hello and introduce yourself, and that and y'all can set a time up where you can talk. Just go ahead and he's live right now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will call right now.
Thank you. All right. All right. What time is it? Are we back? I guess we are. We still recording? Yeah. All right. We're back. Okay. All right. So, as my normal rant this morning, we've set ourselves up now to go through Royce. Royce is program evaluation. And that's what program evaluation is you put all this stuff together that you've learned. But again, I can't say this enough times. There's a right way and a wrong way to do these things, the ethical concern. And we can't do just the things that are expeditious or easy or convenient or feather our own nest. That when we start doing program evaluation, we have to be honest and real and do the absolute best that we can to do this in a disciplined way, to do this inquiry in a disciplined way. We find what we find. We don't preordain the outcome. We don't holler fake news or use a different metric and just let people assume that it's the old metric. We don't do any of that stuff. We approach this from a purely ethical standpoint that we will always do the right thing regardless, and the chips fall where they may. So let's begin our look at Royce. Let me get that out. So here are the things that we would want to look at. This is from Royce chapter 1. Here are the things that we would want to look at if we were evaluating a program, whether somebody else's program or organization, our own, or in this case, a part of our own or a part of somebody else's as a consultant. When I say our own, that means, remember, we wear two hats. For the purposes of this class, we wear two hats, and I've tried to remind us that we look at the world through the eyes of the consultant, where we're external to the organization and they invite us in, or our own organization as the leader. Because sometimes we do both. I mean, I have to look at my own program at Gardner-Webb as being a part of the leader of that group, but I also get called on a fairly frequent basis to consult for other organizations. You have to be able to understand the differences and the similarities, but you have to be able to look at both of those. If you're going to be a consultant or if you're just in a leadership role. First thing is you look at staffing. And staffing is more than just personnel. Personnel is the people that you've got and what you do with them. Staffing is how you get them, how you onboard them, how many you have, the cost, all of those things go into staffing. So, you know, one of the things that especially when organizations, you know, their budgets are tight or they're not being able to meet their bills or whatever, the first thing we look at is how many people do you have? I got a call from one of our DEOL graduates fairly recently. I won't use her name, because some of you might know her. She graduated from our program 2 or 3 years ago, and she took a job at Gardner-Webb over in student success with another one of our graduates who was in the same cohort who had a job over there. And she called me up and she said, "Is this what you were talking about when you told us about right sizing an organization in terms of staffing?" And that's the discussion we're going to have now, is right sizing. And this is exactly what I was talking about. She said, "They won't hire me an assistant." I said, "They hired you as the assistant. Why would they hire somebody to do your work? They hired you to do Carmen's work. Why would they hire you somebody?" I said, you understand that there's no money in the budget for you an assistant. You are the assistant. And so somebody has to do the work. We can't just keep on hiring people to do the work of somebody else. That's common within organizations, especially patronage organizations, like a college. You know, private college is a patronage organization. It's not really a professional organization. It's a patronage organization, and we're in employment. Public schools, are employment. Now, all the jobs aren't patronage jobs in school because they require licensure. But districts are fighting that now. The Republican legislature is trying to fight teacher licensure, where you can just be a resident teacher. We just give you a job. That's what charter schools do. He knows a lot about history. We'll hire him to teach history. We don't have to pay him full salary or give him benefits. That's what a lot of charter schools do. And now the legislature is trying to do the same thing in public schools, because we can't hire Clyde's granddaughter because she doesn't have a college degree. We need to be able to hire her. So let's do away with standards. That's part of what's going on in staffing. But in most organizations, you can't afford to do that. Gardner-Webb can't afford to. Gardner-Webb's problem is real simple. Over the last 10 years or so, 13 years since the economic crash of 2008, the undergraduate enrollment at Gardner-Webb has declined by 1,000, while at the same time, faculty and staff positions have increased to 125. Let me say that again. When they had 1,000 undergraduate students more, they had 400 faculty and staff. We now have 525 faculty and staff for 1,000 less students on campus. And we wonder why we run $5 million short in the budget every year. In the business, we would call that duh. You can't pay your bills because you got too many people. Staffing. Right sizing your organization simply means you do zero-sum budgeting. We start every year with a zero sum, and we look at the money that we have and we assign it to our priorities throughout in our mission vision. What are our priorities in our organization? And we assign them a budget. This is how much you get. We don't just carry it over. It's zero sum every year. This is our priority. This is how much you get, and then that's how many people you hire. And if you don't have enough money, then somebody has to go home. And Tammy said, I need an assistant. There's no money in right sizing the organization. That's how much you get for your division. There's not money for an assistant. You are the assistant. But I'm having to work longer hours than I want to. My hair fell out. That's just as relevant as you're working too many hours more than you want to. You signed on for the job. Did they promise you an assistant? Well, no, but I just thought I'd get one if I needed it. No, that's not how staffing works. That's not how zero-sum budgeting works. This is how much money you have based on the priority that this part of the organization has. And if the work's a little or a lot, you signed on for it. But you can't spend money that you don't have, or you can't spend money on things that are not a priority in your organization. You put your money where your priorities are. Now, student success is important, but we can't have classrooms empty with instructors because we got people over working with them to try to make them successful. What's the most, what determines success of kids? How well they do in college, how well they do in class. And so, the initiative at Gardner-Webb, and the reason why the number of people has gone up is because they've tried to get class sizes down to a more reasonable level. And stop teaching in lecture halls. You can get that at a state university for half the price. I had Kim in my inorganic chemistry when I was a freshman at NC State. Now, I know that was back in the horse and buggy days, but my inorganic chemistry class had 440 people in it. 440 in Chem 101. And then the second one, Chem 103, had 440. We were in Jamaica, I was in 222 Dabney. And if Jamaica knows, it starts on the second floor and ends on the first. That's how big it is. There's 440 seats in there. And every one of them had somebody in it. Me mostly sleeping, but I was there. 440. How much personal attention can you get in a class of 440 students in inorganic chemistry? That would be none. There was no questions. There was no Socratic debate. Of course, inorganic chemistry doesn't lend itself to that to begin with, but 440 students. But now, you had lab over in Tompkins, or Withers, excuse me, I'm not Tompkins, in Withers. You had labs over in Withers. The problem was your instructor over there at Withers when you were having lab? I don't think so. They had either a guy who was a senior. Most of the lab TAs were seniors in chemistry majors trying to get in med school, who didn't have very much time for you. So when you went over there, they were in the lab, and they told you don't set anything on fire and don't drink anything while you're in here. Don't set anything on fire. How much help were they over in lab? These guys they were less than none. Now, sometimes if you got lucky in the upper level labs, you might get a grad student who might have a little pity on you and answer a question. But the seniors in the first one, they wouldn't have given you air if you were in a jug. And so basically you had to teach yourself. That's not a very good system, but it's a cost-effective system. And when you're only interested in 30% of students passing, the top 30% was all that passed back in those days. We had ABC, no credit, didn't have D's. And we didn't have a criterion. We had a normative reference, bell-shaped curve. Top 10% made A's, second 10% made B's, third 10% made C's, and that was it. The other 70% failed. Very, European Darwinism system of education. So personal contact didn't matter. But we lost 70% every year. But that was our model, because we had thousands of people waiting for your seat. Private colleges don't have that luxury. You need to do better. You don't need to throw your kids away. And so, Gardner Webb has put their money in trying to reduce class sizes and have people that actually care about students actually teach them in smaller groups where they can help them get through. Everybody knows that, if you're in any of the physical mathematical sciences, that inorganic chemistry is the gatekeeper. Everybody understands that. That's where you weed everybody out. You never get to physics or organic chemistry because inorganic weeds you out. That's a very Darwinistic system. So you understand that, but it's the absolute best system from a staffing personnel perspective. You don't have to have very many people. Those full professors that teach classes, you only have to have one of them for every 440 students. They cost a whole lot more than those senior TAs. That you got to have enough. There's 30 in your lab, because there's 30 lab stations, and you pay a guy $1 an hour. Basically, it's about what they made back then. Minimum wage was like $1.87, and they made like $1 an hour to sit in those labs. And they weren't paid to teach you anything. They were just paid to open the door, make sure you didn't burn the place down or poison yourself. And they sat and studied and did their own work in the little office area there. And that they could look out and, quit that, turn that burner off, don't blow us up. But that's all they did. But that's what they got, And so, again, it's a financial model. And all that goes into staffing. Now, also what goes into staffing is performance reviews. A lot of what you're going to do as a consultant, you're going to find is we got enough people, they just don't get it done. That's unfortunate, but that's we have to, again, the chips fall where they may. We go back to the case of wine case study is couldn't get it done. They were failing because the performance issues there. Now, some of them were people who didn't care, but some of them was she can't pour the wine. We can only do this, do that. Again, performance issues. I go back to the case study with John. He's too busy scheming how to advance his career and further his little group He's not doing the work of the organization. He's doing John's work. Again, all that comes under staffing. The amount, how much you pay them, how much work they do, the performance that they have, that all action research, all of what we do is going to be one of three problems: people, process, or product. And that's the first one we look at, is the people. But we have to remember, we're looking at all of those things. And so that's where we start in program evaluation, is with people. And so staffing is more than just the number. It has all of those parts and pieces to it. Budgets, we just talked about that. Stable funding, that's what Tim's working on right now, is stable funding. If you don't sell a good or a product, if you don't sell it, if you deliver it, like a library doesn't sell a product, it delivers a product, which is access to information. That's their product. And you got to have stable funding. You say, well, the university gives you money, but if it's not enough to get your, to get your mission accomplished, they expect you to go out and do some fundraising on resource development on your own. And you have to be able to do that. You have to understand, you got to be able to pay your bills. Number one goal of the leader of an organization is to keep your organization alive. You got to pay your bills. And Tim just had a conversation with Woody Fish. Woody's a friend of mine who's he's a fundraising maven. He is an expert in the area of fundraising, endowment for universities. And he will tell you, nobody gives so that you can pay the light bill. That's what Woody's famous for saying that. People give to big ideas, to good causes. They expect you to be able to manage your budget where you can pay your light bill. And so when we talk about stable funding, you've got to have funding that pays for the basics, that pays your obligations monthly. And then, but you've also got to have a way to raise money in nonprofits for things that you want, desire, growth, and those things. But you've got to live within your means and being able to pay your bills, your obligations, your salaries, power bill, utilities, those things. Service philosophy, are you delivering? So if you're not delivering a physical product, a widget, a box, a tchotchke, whatever, business term you want to use, a thing, if you're delivering service, but you got to have a service philosophy no matter what. That even if we do make a product, I've got to service that product, that when it rolls off out the door, whatever it is, that I have to stand behind it, that my goods or services I have to stand behind, that I can't stay in business, especially in the modern era of social media. I can't stay in with Yelp reviews. I can't stay in business if I don't stand behind my product. Recognized identity, that goes back to mission, vision, all those things, conceptual, theoretical foundation. That's why we have you do that. You've got to understand those things. Again, something as simple as the change. You got to unfreeze, move, and refreeze. That's what we're talking about. You've got to understand the conceptual, theoretical foundation behind the things that you're trying to do in your organization. There's a lot of literature out there that's basically do's and don'ts. Systematic efforts or the empirical evaluation of services. You ought to always be doing self-assessment. Always do continuous improvement. Improvement science, a continuous improvement model. Evidence-based research foundation, disciplined inquiry. That's what you have to do. Okay. We've covered this one ad nauseum. As you can tell, it is my pet peeve in research over my career. I have seen it used and abused. Numbers, methodology, people who know more than some other people, and use that for evil rather than good. It is, I've covered this enough. It is, to me, the heart of what we do. It is the most important piece of what we do, that whatever we do, that we're honest and true, and we're above reproach in all the things that we do. And I've done that, so I'll move on from that. Needs assessments. This is generally survey work that all of you are doing, where we ask people what you need. It's a needs assessment's not hard. It's not difficult to understand. It's, what do we need? You need to ask people. I can't help you or know what you need unless you can tell me. And so we do a lot of these, but it's always, we're trying to improve our programs, but it's used to prioritize spending and allocate resources. That's what I was talking about earlier. When we talk about budgeting, I'm a big proponent of zero-based budget. The budget goes to zero every year. What do you need? How many people, how much money, how many resources? What do you need? Not what do you desire or what would be perfect. What is our baseline here? Needs assessment. You have to do that. It is the heart of budgeting. What do you need? And that's one of those. Remember the first slide, staffing, budgeting. Needs assessment is the heart of budget. It always should go back to the money or resources. That's my tip or trick on needs assessment. We've gone over this one ad infinitum as well. What is mixed methodology? We do quantitative and qualitative. We looked at that today. We either do it in one of two ways. There's three ways to do it. We don't ever do the third, ever. On DEOL, we never do the third. We never do exploratory because it's theoretical or hypothetical. We're doing action research in real organizations, so we either do convergent design or we do explanatory design, one or the other. But we know what they are. We know what qualitative is. We know what quantitative is. We know that they both have value. That qualitative is real data. We know all those things. But that's our design. So we've covered that piece. All right, formative and process evaluation. You've heard me harp on this one in the action plan. Formative assessment is not give the kids a test halfway through the year and then summative at the end of the year. Formative assessment is the adults and the process. It's a fidelity check. Are the adults delivering what we ask them to deliver? Again, I use the example that I used before to be redundant. That's just the way it works. I was an elementary principal. We'd get the reading adoption, the new textbooks, roll them down the book room. They'd sit there all year. Nobody go to the room, check to see if the teachers were even had them, passed them out, or using them. And at the end of the year, when they take California achievement tests, they'd say, "Oh, that reading adoption didn't work any better than the one did last year." And the problem was that teachers were using the old books that they liked and knew and didn't have to do any lesson plans. Adult convenience. And except the test questions on the California Achievement Test had changed. And they couldn't understand why they kept teaching just as hard as they always did, but never got any different. You know, again, Harger's double loop theory, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Why were the teachers using those old textbooks? Ah, they change every year. I know this one. I don't have to make new lesson plans. Go back to when I was a high school teacher, you know, Jim McClure, God rest his soul. You know, Jim was supposed to be my mentor chemistry teacher. Jim's notes were so old they'd turn yellow, and they weren't from a yellow legal pad. They weren't yellow legal pads back then. They were white. They'd turn low. You know, Jim had, you know, do you think Jim had kept up with the latest textbooks in chemistry or any of that? Well, of course not. He'd have to write new notes or make new lesson plans. You know, thankfully Jim was gone really before end of course testing hit high schools, because none of the things that Jim taught were actually on the exam. Are the adults delivering what we said they're supposed to deliver? That's a school example. In other organizations, we say we're you know, we tell our people that this is how we're going to do this. Do we go out and check on them to make sure that they're going to do it? This is how the process is going to work. Did we really go check to make sure the process works that way? You know, we've got a machine that's not doing the right thing, and every one of the pieces that come out of it are defective. Do we go and check, or we just sit and grumble about it at the end? What are we going to do with this now? Anybody see the movie Schindler's List? What did they do in the process to make sure that none of the war parts that they made would work? You understand that in the movie Schindler's List, he got all these Jewish people and he kept them, you know, from being killed or sent to the gas chamber because he was running a factory that was producing what was it, bomb casings for the war effort for the Germans. But what did they do to the calibration of the machine? They made sure the process at the end, they had a casing, but it wouldn't work. And nobody could, you know, I know that supposedly it's based on a real story that they couldn't figure out why none of them ever worked. Nobody would check the process. That's where things like that is where the industrial or business or management process of Six Sigma came from. Check your process along the way. Make sure your machines are calibrated. Don't sit and just wait for it to be turned out and it doesn't work. What are you going to do then? You know, check the process along the way. That's what Six Sigma is. But again, that formative assessment piece, that's what they really pay you for as a leader. School principal, you're supposed to go to that room and make sure that instruction is happening out of that book that's been adopted, or the materials that relate to the test. In a nonprofit, you go and make sure people are making those calls, getting those pledges, or delivering that service. Those are the things that you're supposed to be doing. If you're city communities and schools, you're making sure that those places are open in the afternoon and those people are tutoring those kids, and not just going out and playing basketball in the afternoons or doing board games or whatever. That if we're supposed to be tutoring these kids, if somebody's actually tutoring these kids, and not just having, it's not just the police athletic league having ball games. Somebody has to go and check. That would be you as the leader, and that's a big part of program evaluation. single system research designs. That's what we do. Single system research design. We're working with one organization doing qualitative and quantitative. That's what we're doing. We're not doing meta-analysis. We're not doing multiples. We're just doing one. It's been, people say, well, you know, but see, for our purposes, we're not trying to generalize what we find to other organizations. We're working with one specific organization. And it is valid to do program evaluation as long as we don't go out and try to say every business ought to do this, or this, every organization ought to do this. We're working with one that has been recognized for over 50 years as being a valid research methodology. Action research means, you know, it's real, but it's just one. But we're not trying to say what we found here at Union Carbide will work over here at Dow. Well, that's not what we're saying. And so we have to understand that it's an ad hoc internal, what we do. And that's what everybody does. And we only do program evaluation for the purposes of that particular organization, company, entity. Just them. It's okay to do research that way. When we first started doing research 100 years ago or more, everything was theoretical. But then we realized that was a one size fits all, that may or may not. And so for the last 50 years, now 60 years, it is accepted practice to do this at one organization. That's valid for them, and more so than anything else that we could do. Oh gosh, we've talked about this 1,000 times. Client satisfaction. Satisfaction surveys. Are you happy with the service you got? What is what's the net promoter score? What is that? Net promoter. Would you get it with our services again? Would you patronize against us again, and would you refer us to a family or friend? That's client satisfaction. So let me look at my phone right quick. I had this pulled up till everybody started texting and emailing me this morning. So this week, Facebook reflection. Cecily. Okay. Reminder of multi-factor analysis workshop. Crystal. I don't know where in the world it went. You know how it stacks, our email stacks. Let me do it right quick over here. If I find it. I wanted to look at this most specifically. 7. Right. How'd we do? I had to send and the reason I wanted to do this is from the local shipping place, Postmark, where you go and, do all your shipping and receiving needs, UPS, FedEx, all that stuff. And so when you return something, you simply forward them the email that you with the return instructions and the shipping label, and you just forward. You go in, you just take that email and you forward it to them right there, and they can print all that stuff out and do all those things, and then they have your email, and they immediately, as you can see, I postmark them here. I forwarded to them the label and the return instructions, and then immediately, before I could even get out the door, thank you. My team recently completed a request. I mean, I hadn't even got back to the truck yet. Take a moment to give us your feedback. Customer service. Now, here's the problem. What's wrong with their survey tool?
It kind of bails the customer out, not picking a shot.
That's exactly right. I'd prefer to see 4: satisfied, extremely satisfied, dissatisfied, extremely dissatisfied. By doing it this way, we really don't know. If somebody clicks the middle, we don't have any data. The middle is unusable. It's not really data. But at least they were trying. They didn't know how, but they were trying. And so the notion here is very simple. And we say this every day. Dumb old men. If you want to know, ask. If you want to know how you did, ask. But you need to make sure you ask in a way that gives you some data. Don't ask in a way that doesn't tell you anything. I applaud their efforts to find out if I was satisfied or dissatisfied. But if you give me the middle column, 90% of people, again, make it sound real, 90% of people will mark the middle column and just go on about their business. And what does that tell you? It tells you exactly nothing. But I applaud the effort. But the notion here is when you're delivering a service, when your product is a service, people, process, product, that's what we're working on here today. When our product is a service, you better ask how you did. When I take my truck to get it serviced, I'm religious about that. Oh, I saw a meme yesterday that I just loved. It said, if you're broke down on the side of the road, I'm not going to stop and help you. Somebody called and offered you an extended auto warranty several times. Do you get those calls every day like I do? My phone rings off the hook. I block that number and they go whatever. But now, I love that one. That's a great one. I'm not stopping to help you. You have a chance to get an extended warranty. But now my Chevrolet truck, I take it to 1 or 2 places according to where I am in the world and how because I'm religious about getting my truck serviced on time. I believe that I'm on the road after dark all over the state, and so I need something dependable. And so I keep my stuff up. And when it gets 200,000 miles, I'll get something else. I've got about 130 on it now. But I keep my vehicles religiously. That was my as I said, that was William that called me. He's my truck and vehicle cleanup man. He's had COVID and been out for a little while, but he'll come tomorrow. Gotta keep your stuff up. If you own stuff, you got to keep it up. And most of the time in that field, or in that area, it's a service that people are buying from you. Now, a lot of times that service is not required. you can get away with not doing it. You know, you might have implications. I use my vehicle. You know, I'm going to try to get 200,000 miles out of my truck. Now, I know the best way to do that is to keep it clean and keep it serviced. Keep wax on it. Don't let it rust. You know, keep it serviced. Keep good tires on it. All those kinds of things. I don't have to do any of that. And the notion here is this: if your service doesn't work, or if it's difficult, or it's aggravating, people will skip it. People will skip it. If you got to go and stay all day at the Chevrolet dealership to get your tires rotated and your oil changed, you might skip it. Or I'll just get me the oil change. I don't have time. If it's going to take an extra hour to get my tires rotated, I just won't do that. But you know, the truth of the matter is, I could have went to work and printed out that label and then went somewhere and done that. But I just stopped right out here on my way out and forwarded them the email. And it's a prepaid return label. It cost me $1. It cost me $1 to do that, because they're so good, they're so fast, they're quick, their service is so good. But I didn't have to do that. I could have printed out the label myself and just dropped it off at any shipping location and saved my $1. But it was just so much easier to do that, to make sure it was done. I was going to have to go to a place to physically take the guitar anyway. I bought a guitar from musician's friend. You know, I do different. We have a lot of young people who come to Gardner Webb, who in the music program, and they're just in the building next to me, but we try to get them a little stuff every now and then, and I found that when I find these bargains online, I name brand stuff at a bargain, and I bought a bargain guitar. It was a Gretsch. It was a nice guitar. It was a hollow body with a Bigsby. It's a really nice guitar. Unfortunately, when I got it, they're dual pickups. The neck pickup was not wired in, and there's not really any way you can fix that. They don't have an access panel on the back of the guitar, and so I had to return it. I hate that. I'll try to find him another one. We do that kind of stuff, and so I'm always getting guitars, relatively expensive guitars or other musical equipment, and kids that need them, and we actually donate them to the college, and the kid can use it the time that they're there, and then pass it on. And the college won't buy guitars. Now they'll buy horns or whatever for the band, but they won't buy certain musical instruments, and so we try to get that privately. And we try to do some other things, there in service to the community and to the kids. Don't think I'm a good person. I'm trying not to sprain my shoulder, pat myself on, but I think a lot of folks do this. We do things that we can at the university, and so. But when you're in that kind of thing all the time, nobody's paying me to do that. I don't want to be aggravated. I want service that works. Again, I'm choosing this. I could choose to do something different or not do this. Again, when you're providing a service, remember that people are not obligated. You need that feedback, but you need it again, back to our case study, you need it in a way that that it's informative, that informs you. Using that middle column never works. It needs to be an even number, not an odd number. That doesn't need to be 3 or 5. It needs to be 2 or 4. Satisfied, dissatisfied. Odd numbers don't work in satisfaction surveys. Sampling, Lord, we've talked about sampling. Convenient samples, when we're working with a single research design, convenient sample is okay. because that's who we're working with them specifically. But if we're sampling inside of the organization, we still have to be disciplined in our inquiry. That's what I was talking about this morning with Jonathan Davis at Cleveland Community College. We couldn't get data on everybody that teaches. It would just be too big a job logistically, especially with all the adjuncts that community colleges use that are remote. Just like me in my program at Gardner Webb, I've got 31 people. Now, I've got 2 full-time that are there on campus with me, but I've got 31 adjuncts. How in the world could I ever get in and see them live or go out? I have that same issue. I understand it. And so if you're trying to gather data or information, you'll have to run a sample sometimes. And so you got to make sure your technique is clean, that you're not using an outlier population, even inside of one organization. But again, all the ethics here apply. We don't go to a group that we know, we don't go to the trailer park in the South when we're trying to prove they're UFOs. Because we know that crowd's will tell you all about their latest encounter with aliens this week, not the one from last week. We have a duty and responsibility to be ethical and disciplined in our sampling, and we've gone over that enough times that you know how that is, what that is. Group research designs, we haven't talked about that a lot. And here's the why. Group designs are labeled quasi-experimental and experimental. And what have we talked about this semester? We don't do, I covered it again this morning, the 3 types of mixed methodology designs: convergent, explanatory, and exploratory. We don't do exploratory. That's why we haven't talked about group research. We've only talked about single designs with a single entity. If you're doing theoretical work, you have to have more than one organization. You have to have data. You have to have more varied data sources. You have to do group designs when you're doing experimental work. And that's when sampling really kicks in, when you're doing more than just that one organization. That's why I'm looking for that sentence. That's why we haven't talked about group research. That's when we do theoretical work. We're doing ad hoc, internal with one organization, single research design. Okay. Cost effectiveness, cost analysis, we talked about that. Cost benefit analysis, how much money you're getting versus how much you're bringing back. Cost analysis, how much is something actually costing you? And that's why in the action plan, that graphic that I gave you, we had resources, because there's 2 types and they both cost you money, but we don't see. When we're doing programs, treatments or fixes, when we bring in whatever we're trying to do, the cost is both fiscal, that's money, how much does this cost? But it's also human, how many people? But we have to count those people's salaries. That's one of the mistakes that we make in the business. We think because we've already got these people here, it's not costing us anything. But if you go back to zero-sum budgeting, that's the notion here. It's cost benefit analysis and cost analysis. We start with a zero budget every year. How much, what do you need? And this is how much money we give you. And we understand, and one of the things that forces us to do is to understand what something really costs, not just how much physical money we have to give, but how much we're spending in personnel as well. The place where we don't we really don't understand this or act as if we understand this is in the school business. K-12 education is where it's the worst. We don't, because the state sends us teacher salaries. Federal government pays for all your federal programs. Federal programs in public school would be CTE, career and technical education, what used to be called vocational. Title I, exceptional children, disadvantaged 504, your English as second language, all of those are federally, the federal government pays for those teachers. Then the state allots you teachers based on the number of pupils you have, average daily membership, ADM, state pays for them. And the local only pays for any additional local teachers that they want to buy. They don't buy a lot anymore because they have to keep up since the state got out of capital, which is buildings and paying for buildings to keep them up. You know, only the more high wealth districts can buy extra teachers. But because the vast majority of teachers in public education are paid for either by the federal government, federal programs, or I forgot the sixth one, academically gifted. So those 6 areas, they pay for all those teachers, and then the state pays for 95% of your core teachers, your English, math, your first grade teacher, your third grade, or whatever. The state pays for all of those. We don't really understand that we have that's cost, that costs money, and that we need to be good stewards of the time that we have those people. We can't be wasting their time when the state's paying them and we need for them to be teaching. We can't be wasting their time fundraising or doing other things that don't matter toward our mission of our school. And one of the things that I used to have to go out and have conversations with school principals about is why aren't you teachers teaching? I mean, why are we out doing pep rallies and building banners? And you're wasting this. The state's paying these teachers to teach these kids. Why you got them doing something else? You do understand that you're wasting time that's being paid for to do this thing. That as an organization, we're not being successful because we're wasting our resources here. But they didn't see it that way. They didn't see that there was a cost or a waste going on. That's gotten better in more modern times. But especially in nonprofits where somebody else pays, the government, some entity, United Way sends money. When you have that kind of external funding sometimes for positions, people don't see how much it's really costing or don't understand how they're wasting that, because since they're not paying for it. But that's one of those things that really nonprofits tend to do is they have their employees doing things that don't matter and waste what resources they get. Nonprofits are famous for that. And so that's one of the things that what are they doing? How much is this costing? What are they doing with that time? And it's not just how much money do we need to be able to have. It's what are we doing with our personnel, with our resources, fiscal and human. And so we got to look at that cost effectiveness. Measurement tools and strategies, that's what we've talked about all, they've got to be valid and reliable. We've talked about that all semester, those things. Selecting the best, we talked about that. Again, you can go through this. We the classic example is if we are looking at our data, it tells us what our methodology is, and between our methodology and how we collected our data and what it is, that tells us how we can analyze it, what tools that we can use to do that. We've talked about chi-square, which just simply make sure that our survey data, our opinion data, if it was from a sample and not the whole group, that sample matches the whole group, or that what we would expect to find is not an outlier. We use chi-square. We've talked about mean, median, and mode, our measures of central tendency when we're reporting our data. And when we're analyzing our data, those are common things that we use. When we report our data, we use levels of measurement, interval, ordinal, nominal, ratio. Again, I told you the story where, reporting the data for the PGA Tour for years, they misrepresented the data in the world golf rankings. They just listed them in order, Tiger 1, Phil 2, and not the interval. That Tiger was 1,000,000 points ahead of Phil. But that was, that they did that to deceive the public, to make it appear that there was a chance that the Great White Hope Phil was going to pass Tiger. He's the champion of that group. And that he had a chance this week. If he could beat Tiger this week, he could be he could beat Tiger every week. The next 3 years would be number one. Tiger's 1,000,000 points ahead, but we didn't want to tell that story. We need the redneck viewership. We need for them to turn it on every Sunday. So we've got to create this false narrative. And so, but that's on the back side of that. On the front side of that, we apply the appropriate statistic to the data and the methodology that we have. We don't do a lot of inferential work on the backside, linear regressions or analysis of variance. That's why I hadn't spent a lot of time on those. Those are kind of predictive things. We can use those in a real sense if we have collected hard data, from a validated measure. But when we didn't do that, we report what we found, in a frequency chart mode on survey. This is what people believe. Now, if we have hard data from a validated measure, we could run analysis of variance, and simply all that is trying to figure out what contributed to the variance in the final score. What were the independent variables that contributed to the variance in the dependent variable, the final score? Looking at a kid's test score, what are the things that influence that? What are the independent variables that determine the dependent variable? We can do that, but we can only do that with scores from a validated measure. We can't do that with opinion work. And we can't do that with assessment work, where even though we use a scale, somebody external assigned that based on their opinion. Let's make sure we understand this now. Again, we'll go back to public school. When the second grade teacher goes into a class and does M-class or I-class work, they give the kid a score. Did the kid take a test? He did not. Whose opinion was it what score he ought to get? That would be the teacher. Or you say, well, we got this panel at our school of teachers, or we use somebody else in another classroom. But again, did the kid actually take a test? No, he did not. In the end, it turned out to be somebody's opinion. Now, in Melody's classroom, she's a fifth grade teacher. Her kids take the test. Kids from grades 3 up take the test. We can do we can do a linear regression, or we can do, after we've done an analysis of variance, we can do analysis of variance on her test scores because the kid took the test. It's a validated measure. But K2, the teacher or a group of teachers or a teacher down the hall assesses the kid. It's got a number, it's a rubric, it's a metric, but the kid didn't take the test. We can't be doing analysis of variance because, again, in the end, it's just opinion. Well, I saw that. Again, it's just your opinion. The kid didn't take the test. When the kid takes the test and he makes a 60, that's not my opinion. That's how many he got. He got 6 out of 10 right. We can only do analysis of variance, linear regressions off the results of a validated measure that the kid or the actual sample group population, the sample of the population, that they actually, a test they actually took themselves. If it was an assessment where somebody else assessed them based on their opinion, even if it was based off a rubric, it doesn't matter. We can't use that. We can't use that to do analysis of variance or linear regression. It has to be from a validated measure that they took and not somebody's opinion. Now, we can use opinion data. We can report it, but we can't run analysis of variance and do prediction equations off of it. The prediction equations, basically tell us what we should take away and what we should add more of. But we can't do that unless it's from a validated measure. But we know the other things that we can use. We can use measures of central tendency. We can report using levels of measurement. We understand chi-square simply as a goodness of fit. It shows us whether this is an outlier group or not. We understand, the chi-square looks at opinion data. The companion to that on the other side, if we were looking at quantitative data that wasn't somebody's opinion, we would do a z-test. We can do a z-test, not a z-score, a z-test to make sure that the sample that we pulled is not an outlier. So that's a big thing in research, is we don't want outliers. We do not want outliers. We want to make sure that we're working, that we didn't just at random pick somebody wrong. We want to be able to look at our organizations and do things the right way and get results the right way. And so when it's opinion data, we run chi-square. If it's a sample of a larger population inside of the same organization, if it's a score from a validated measure, we do z-test to make sure it wasn't an outlier group, that it's going to matter to the whole organization. T-test, that's a simple one. We do that. We can do that. That's just before and after. That's pre and post test. We test, do the treatment to the employees or the students, and then we test them at the end to see if they got it. Pre and post test. Very simple. That's the T-test. It's a T-test. And the other thing in this realm is Z scores. This is the most misunderstood one that we have. That's why I saved it to last. Z score, or standardized score. The use of a Z score is we take scores from disparate, that means different scales, that purport to measure the same thing, and we convert them to a z-score, which is -1 to +1, so that we can compare them. We can't just do a ratio comparison. We can't just say, all right, SAT's on 1600 point scale. We'll divide 1600 into the score, and that'll give us a conversion or a ratio. And then we'll do the same thing with the, what was that, GRE? I just said the GRE, and we do it that way. And then we take the MAT, which is on a 100 point scale. We take that score, we made 60, we divide it. We can't do that. We have to factor in the standard deviation. And so when we use a z-score conversion, it factors in the standard deviation, and it takes the score that's on the scale of 1600 you made 1,200 on that, and it compares it to the score of 60 on the MAT to tell you which one of those is greater than the other. But it doesn't just divide the big number into the little number. What it does is it does that, but it also calculates in the standard deviation, the mean and the standard deviation. And that gives you a real comparative basis. You have to know the mean and the standard deviation. And if you do that, you can convert and know what the scale is. The scale on MAT is 1,600. The scale on the scale on the GRE is 1,600. Scale on the MAT is 100. And you can take either one, but if you want to compare the scores, now they both purport to estimate a student's ability to do graduate work. Now, you can't do a z-score conversion and compare things that don't purport to measure the same thing. That's where the mistake always comes in. Like comparing SAT and class rank, they don't purport to measure the same thing. Let me say that again. SAT and class rank are two variables, but they don't measure the same thing. They're on disparate scales, that is true, but they don't purport to measure the same thing. Class rank just says, of all these people, where does this person come up mathematically? The SAT predicts your success in college. You say, well, a lot of people use the class rank is yeah, but that's not what the intent of class rank is. It may be one of those variables in success, but it is not a predictor. It simply is, where does this person rank in this group of people on their grade point average? It's similar, but it does not purport to measure the same thing. Now, you can weight it in an algorithm, but it's not the same thing. It's not a comparison, either or kind of thing. So understanding that z-score has to, the important piece here is that they purport to measure the same thing. That's when the z-score works. If you don't, it does not work. All right. Pragmatic issues, why is treatment fidelity, and what is it so important? To make sure, how many times you heard me say fidelity checks, formative assessment. Make sure that we're delivering the treatment as intended. That's what the leader does. That is your entire job. If you're a college professor, if you're a school teacher, your job is to deliver instruction. If you're in a nonprofit of some sort, you know what your job is to deliver. What are you delivering? What is my role? What am I supposed to do? And then the leader of the organization, it's your job to go around and make sure that they're delivering it. That's a fidelity check. Just because you tell people to go and do something doesn't mean that they will. I tell my principal candidates all the time, they don't pay you to teach a soul. They pay you to make sure other people are teaching. That's what we pay you for. Go back to Jones Sausage. I've told y'all Jones Sausage happened. All right, so when I'm heading out to go to Wilmington or somewhere, down in that part of the world, I leave here. I just hit 40 right up here at Statesville and go to Raleigh and go around the loop, and Interstate 40 goes from east to west or west to east in North Carolina until it gets to Raleigh. And then what does it do? Turns directly south and goes to Wilmington. And when you go around the loop, the first exit after you go around, the outer loop and head south toward Wilmington is exit 306, Jones Sausage Road, Jones, Jones Sausage Road. There's a big old co-packing plant there. They make sausage. And that's always, that's the gag for me is what they do at Jones Sausage. They make sausage. Kind of in the title, isn't it? It's kind of self-explanatory. What do we do in school? We teach kids. That's our sausage. That's what we do. That is our deliverable. That's our product. That's what we do. We teach kids. Everything else we do is incidental to that. And so what do we hire school administrators to do? To make sure that kids get taught, period. That's your number one job. First and foremost is fidelity checks. Not what to teach, but how to teach. The curriculum comes to us already prepackaged. We don't decide in school what to teach or not to teach. That's not it. It's about delivery. It's about how. That's what fidelity checks are. We've already decided what program we're going to do, or what treatment, or what we're going to do. What our change is going to be. We've already decided that. Fidelity is going out there and making sure it's being delivered. I can't stress that enough. That's what leaders do. That's your job. That is it. People say, what is leadership? I don't understand. It's make sure that things get done. That's a very pragmatic view, but that's how it works. You can't assume that it's going to get done unless you go and see and make sure it's getting done. And finally, writing evaluation proposals, reports, and journal articles. For our purposes, it's your final presentation in this class, which will be about 90% of your final presentation at your defense, the entire executive summary. This is the majority of it. It's not all of it, but it is the majority of it. But we've talked about that. I've given you the format. I've given you the template on how to do a qualitative data project and a quantitative. I've given you the template on how you build your proposal, how you write those things. Again, we write the proposal in future tense, and at the final defense, we write it in past tense. Doesn't matter where we are in the work. Proposal's always future. Defense, final defense is always past. But we've gone through each of those pieces on how you put all this together. And that's, because you're basically doing a report. That's what you're doing back to your organization. But we have to use the disciplined inquiry. I didn't just come in your organization and stand around and think, y'all need this. Again, solution hunting the problem. I sell this, so this is what you need. Whether that's my problem or not, we don't do that. We have a disciplined approach that's driven by our ethical concern. That data is real. We've really collected this. We've done these things. We haven't gone to an area and got the data from people we knew that was not real. Just in order to try to advance our perspective, our point, or whatever. If I'm selling you tinfoil hats to protect you from aliens, and then I've got to convince you they're aliens. That's why I had to trailer park in the South. And those people will tell you all about their encounters with aliens, because I'm trying to sell you tinfoil hats to protect you from them. That's the kind of stuff that we can't do. That is a absurd example, but it's just it's not really, unfortunate. Yes. Questions?
Dr. Linton, can you hear me?
I can.
In terms of once we work organization or a program evaluation, but say we're in the consultant role and the recommendations that we make, those come from us, I would make the assumption. And second of all, since we're not involved in implementation, which I agree, hand it to them and go cash the check. I think
That's right.
Just said. Now, question is, what about measurement? If we want to know if we're successful, there has to be some point of measuring. And you might have already talked about this, but do we give them as a gift bag to go? Here's some ideas about measuring, or do we allow the organization to take our recommendations and they're working for a few years and they can call us back? How does measurement play into this? To know that what we recommended is working, or maybe it's not working as we thought.
You tell them how to do it. You don't do it for them. Let's go back to our action plan. That's a great question, David. That's how I was going to end up today anyway. But let's go back to that. Let me share my screen. Let's go back to that. When we hand them our action plan, it has all that stuff in it. That's a great point. Let me pull that back up. And remembering, we've got two examples here. They're part and parcel. F, G, here we go. Today's point, this is in the proposal. Remember, you know, these kinds of things have to be kind of in the proposal stage. The final action plan has all of these stages in it. And again, right here, we tell them, this is how you need to formally, that's what we're talking about, fidelity checks right here. This is, again, this is the heart of what you've got to do. This is the action plan. You give this to the leadership that hired you. Now, again, you don't have to be a part of that, but you tell them, you got to go check on these people. And this is when you should do it and how often you should do it. And this is what your formative assessment method. You tell, and if you're doing this for yourself as the leader of your own organization, you got to build that piece in. And then in the end, you tell them, this is the summative assessment method. This is at the end to know if it's going to work, or if it's working or not. You have to tell them, this would be the measure. This is what you would need to look at to see if this is working or not. And then here's your bigger goal. You know, we're trying to move our reading scores from 60 to 80. But the indicator of success, you expect about 5 points a year. You ain't going to get the whole 20 points in 1 year. These are critical conversations. This is built into what we hand them. This is a graphic organizer example of an action plan. Again, it doesn't have to look exactly like mine, but it has to have all these elements in it. So when we do our proposal down at the bottom, the shorter one is, this is pretty much, you know, what we need to, you know, kind of start out with. But when we have an action plan at the end of this thing, after we've collected our data, these are the kinds of things we look up, you know, but this is the action plan, you know. That slide, that number 5, that slide is just going to be blank at your proposal defense, because you haven't done your research and collected all your data and done your lit review and done your analysis and then your recommendations. And out of all of that comes the action plan. And yes, it needs to have all this stuff in it. Now, again, you don't do it. You know, you hand this to them, but yeah, they got to know how to, you know, to do the fidelity check. They got to know how to assess it at the end. They've got to be reminded what their goal was and what would be a realistic indicator of success. And now you'd be surprised at how many people are in leadership roles that don't understand the difference between goal and indicator of success, or if they do, they're not realistic in what an indicator of success is going to be, because they don't understand standard deviations and normal distributions. We can never expect more than two standard deviations of gain. All scores fall within what percent of the median, the mean in the middle. In a normal distribution, the mean, median, and mode, all three measures of standard deviation, means of central tendency, excuse me. All three measures of central tendency, mean, median, and mode, in a normal distribution, they're all the same and right in the middle, right? That's why it's a normal distribution. All scores fall within 99.7% of all scores fall within two standard deviations. How many times, Melody Johnson, have you seen school districts talk about making 10 or 12, 15, 20 points a gain in 1 year? If anything more than 10 would be impossible. It's near impossible, to get that second deviation after 5. It's near impossible. It is impossible after two standard deviations. It is impossible. I can't tell you the number of times get up and say we're at this percent this year. Our goal is to be at 20, to be 40 points higher next year. And if we don't make it, then we've not been successful. Well, you can't make it if you had guns. You have to have those critical conversations with people who don't understand but think they do. If we work hard enough, Jiminy Cricket, and we believe hard enough, we can make it. No, you can't. No, you can't. We're grounded in reality here. We're doing action research in real life. We're not doing theoretical stuff. That means we can't believe in the Easter fairy or the Easter bunny or the tooth fairy. We can't believe, and again, if I insult somebody, I intended to, we can't believe that taking horse murmur will stop a pandemic. We can't believe in stuff just because we want to. That doesn't make it so. That if we have this synergy, I hate that word. People who believe in synergy don't understand statistics. Let me tell you that. There is no such thing as if we put everything together, we get more than we had in parts. That's not the way it works. Now there may be a synergy in the way we feel, the excitement level or whatever. But synergy does not work in statistics. It is not rational. You can't take more than the input and get more than that in the output. What do we know about matter? What's the second law of thermodynamics? Anybody know? Second law, thermodynamics. Matter is neither lost nor gained. It's just transferred. You can't get more than when you do when you're in chemistry, when you do a chemical reaction, when you write an experiment, you have to balance both sides of the equation, don't you? There's nothing is lost. It's all still there. It might, you say, well, it's physically gone. I burned it up. Well, it created kelvins of energy. Kelvin, and so it wasn't lost. It just transfers. And in statistics, we don't get more than we put in. There is no such thing numerically, statistically, as synergy. That's an emotional thing, kind of like team spirit and momentum on the athletic field. Yeah, you can get that, and you can get players to elevate their level of play, but they're not bigger, stronger, faster than they were already. You just got them to give, to increase their effort. But that faces reality, especially in contact sports. Bigger, stronger, faster beats smaller, slower, weaker. That's the way it works. David and I were talking yesterday. Bradley Sherrod, you'd be looking out of your ear hole because he was bigger, stronger, faster. And if you were coming across the middle, you better be knowing where he was. You know, all the synergy in the world doesn't change that. That doesn't change those numbers. You know, the best teaching in the world by Melody Johnson, she can't get 7 standard deviations out of her kids. That's not going to happen. That's reality, folks. That's numbers. That's real world. It's not stuff that if I say it, that makes it so, or I can just make up and make people, you know, you should believe whatever I tell you because I told you. You know, the whole notion of disciplined inquiry is that you follow the numbers, you follow the data, you're honest, you're ethical, you don't report stuff that's not there. You don't believe stuff because you want it to be so. All of these bad things. That it's not that hard, folks. Trust me, it's not that hard. It's work. It's being disciplined. But now on the backside of this, and we're at the benediction now. We're getting about to be done here. You got to tell people the truth. And a lot of times we thump the numbers, we change the recommendations, or we shade the recommendation not to hurt people's feelings. I don't have that problem. I don't have that gene. That's a character flaw. I don't have that problem, but most normal people do. See, y'all are not. I've told you from the very beginning. Y'all are a lot nicer people than I am. That goes with the territory of being a quantitative person. It has to fit your personality style. Most people are qualitative people because they're not nice, or quantitative people, we don't really care. We wish we could. We try to be better people. I told you, Saul on the road to Damascus. We try to be better people. But now we just tell you what we find. And if it bothers you, if it hurts your feelings or whatever, that's incidental. It's important, and we don't want you to anger people, but you can't tell people just what they want to hear so that they won't feel bad if that's not what the data tells you. And so there is a political component. You need to develop some skill, but you can't be like Miss Smith. Everybody's got pretty eyes. Some people don't. That's just the way it works. I mean, we had a manager when I was high school coach. We had a manager, Stanley Morrison. I love Stanley. His family knew his dad, his older brother. Stanley was so cross-eyed. When he cried, the tears ran down his back. But we love Stanley, but Stanley didn't have pretty eyes. Stanley was able eventually to get the corrective surgery that he needed. Seriously, his dad, Don, did those things, but we love Stanley for Stanley. And Stanley had value and he had worth. We brought him out and had him coach. He couldn't play a sport, not with his eye problem. He couldn't, but we brought Stanley out, and Stanley had value to us. And it didn't have anything to do with that he didn't have this particular trait or whatever. Stanley, we still was able to find value in Stanley, just because he was Stanley. And see, that's the whole notion here, folks, is people have value, and data has value. All these things have value. But just because this is lacking over here doesn't mean that you don't have value as a person or as an organization or what we're trying to do. But too many times we think if we tell them the truth of this, what's this glaringly obvious, it'll hurt their feelings. You don't have to be as brutally honest as I am, but you have to be honest. You have to be honest with people. That doesn't mean that they don't have value, that you don't respect them, or that they have worth. Somehow we've come to this notion that if we tell people the truth, that we're disrespecting them, that we in some way have diminished them, or somehow we have devalued them. Data has no value, folks. It just is. And if you don't if you can't accommodate that, what happens is all the fake stuff, all the manipulation, all of the ways to cheat with data. That's when all that comes in, even if you have the best intentions. But unfortunately, it's the refuge of scoundrels. You've got to tell people the truth, and you've got to be disciplined in your inquiry. So in 3 weeks from today, you folks are going to present. Now, I am always available. We can call, you can email, and we'll Zoom if you want to do. And that's why I always do an extra week in between. We can set something up. Give me, just a few hours notice, and I'll work around other Zooms that I have now. Full disclosure, another one of the reasons why there's an extra week before this. I will be busy next week every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with final defenses. I will be through at noon. So I'm in the afternoon, I'm good. Now I have class at night, as you know, but so next week, Tuesday, Thursday nights, I have class, and I'll be with the Wednesday night group, and that's at 7. So next week I will be available between 12 and 6. But let me have some drive time in there. I need to get back home sometime. I don't sleep in the office anymore. And so so next week I'm available from 12 to 6, Monday through Friday. The 2 weeks after that, back to a more normal schedule. You can catch me most anytime. All right, questions?
Dr. Lamb, just quickly on the standard bell-shaped distribution measured central tendency. Just clarification, you mentioned that
99.7% of all scores will fall within 2 standard deviations of the mean.
And then 1 standard deviation is 68%.
Yep, 66.7.
6.7 on either side.
Yeah.
Okay.
The middle, it goes both ways, good and bad. Now, that's in a normal distribution. Now, of course, you have positive and negative skew. And remember, those are inverse. A positive skew is bad, the negative skew is good. Negative skew means that scores are higher than more scores fall on the higher side of the mean than the lower side. That's a negative skew. A positive skew means that more scores fall on the lower side of the mean. But a normal distribution is half and half. And so all scores fall within 2 standard deviations either way. That's 4 total, but 2 either way of the mean. 99.7, 66.7 fall within 2 standard deviations of the mean. That's 1 either way. That's 1. We call that 1 standard deviation. That's 1. The either way is understood. So 66.7 fall within 1 standard deviation, but that's actually 1 above and 1 below. That's 2 altogether. Same thing, 99.7% of all scores fall within 2 standard deviations. That's 2 up, 2 down. That's the range.
Oh, okay.
Remember, a curve has 2 sides. The mean, median, and mode is in the middle. All 3 measures of central tendency right in the middle of the standard deviation. You can go up, you can go down. But remember, all scores fall within 99.7% of 2 standard deviation, 2 standards up, 2 down.
And once the data comes back from Qualtrics and the quantitative side,
we won't be doing any of, what we'll be doing in Qualtrics again is mostly mode. We just report how many pick this idea. Remember, we're not giving people a test. You know, we're not giving people a test. The only people that give tests is some of my, I've got a principal down in Fort Mill. No, I'm wrong, Clover. I've got a principal down in Clover that's in this program. I had her last semester. Now we are looking at, because her program is about test scores, but it's in the tested areas where the kids take the test. It's not in K2 where they do what we commonly refer to as DIBELS. M class and I class data. We're doing something there, but yeah, now we will look at her test scores, the scores of the kids. But when we do survey work, when we ask people their opinion, we report the mode. We're not looking, when I talk about 99.7% of the scores, that's when, from a validated measure, that's when you take a test. When you take a test, just like your consultancy, nobody's taking a test. Responses, now we're not talking about responses, we're talking about, scores when you take a test. Responses, we just report how many said, this choice, how many said that choice, and whether our choices are yes, no, agree or disagree or strongly. We just report how many, the mode. That's what's important, because again, it's just opinion. It's opinion data. It didn't come from a test. That's the problem with, it's like I was talking about DIBEL data. That data does not come from a test that the kid took. It comes from, it's a survey of the teacher's opinion. That's what DIBEL data is. It's a survey of the teacher's opinion of that kid. It may be based on a score, it may be based on a rubric or a scale, but the teacher looked and said, I think he's a 4, whatever a 4 is. He didn't take a test and make a 4 by answering a test question that had a right and a wrong answer. And so, but normal distributions tell us a lot of things. But remember, it's scores. And so all we do is a frequency distribution where we have an X and Y axis. Let me look at my screen here. Yeah. An X and Y axis, Y is to the sky, X. X is independent variable, Y is dependent variable. We have that. And we scatter. Here's where we can do a scatter plot or a histogram or whatever, but it doesn't do a curve. It may, but we're looking at it from this, and then we scatter it out and we look at it. What shape did it make? But we're more interested in how many people answered yes, or how many answered no, or how many answered agree. We're looking at the number. We're looking at the number of people, not the number itself that we associate with that. That was one of our case studies as well. The case of John, where we had we had the survey data. We don't average those together. We don't care about the average of those. We want to know how many said I'm happy or how many I said I'm sad. If we average it out, they're all just kind of blasé, laissez-faire. Seriously, if you have 5 people that are mad and 5 people that are happy, if you average it together, what you report is we have 10 people that are, what am I looking for? We have 10 people that are, neither excited nor what would be the term that I'm looking for here? What's the word I'm looking for? Disaffected, something like that. That they're not happy and they're not sad. If we looked at the average, we've got we've got 5 people that are just roaringly mad, and we got 5 that are just exceedingly happy. And if we average that, we'd have 10 people who were just blasé. But that's not the reality of it. We need to report we got 5 people that are fighting mad, and we got 5 people that are happy. That's real data. That means something. Why are these 5 people over here fighting mad? Because John is discriminating against them. He's treating them unethically. He's excluding them. He's built his power base. And he is punishing them. Why are these 5 people over here, giggly happy because they're on John's team and they're getting to thrash the other side? They're the winners. That's dysfunctional. That's an untenable situation. But if we average them together, everybody's like, but that's not what we find. So again, we don't, when we're reporting survey opinion, regardless of what metric we use, whether it's agree, disagree, yes, no, whatever, we need to report the mode, the number, because we can't average it together. I mean, if we took me and, Alexandra and averaged our weight, it'd be a normal person. But in reality, she's small and I'm really big. That's reality. Goes back to the old joke. If you have to weigh my luggage as big as I am, then that's too close for comfort. I ain't flying with you. Averages, average works well in some things, but not when we're reporting frequencies of survey data. And so we don't get averages sometimes don't give us a very accurate description, especially when we're doing survey, when we're doing action research, real life stuff. Questions that you have. Again, if you need help, I am always available. And you don't just have to need help. If you just have some ideas to run by me, or you want me to look at what you've got, that's fine too. We can Zoom. I will be there. If you're interested, we're doing some final defenses next week, every day at 10 o'clock. And then one day we have one at 10 and 11. We've got a small group this fall. They were a group of 6. And so we'll have 6 next week. Y'all are a group of 10. But, so they started out as a group of 6. They were off cycle. So, but they're finishing this coming week. They're doing their presentations at 10 o'clock. Online on Zoom. That's one of them that's been texting me all morning, me trying to explain to her I have class, and she knows that. I'm guessing she's already wet her pants today, so I'll help her the best I can. She's melting down, and there's no need to melt down. She's done the work. She's done great work. There's no need to melt down. If you've done the work, you're fine. I will send out a document to you along with Monica's written report. I will send out the document that has everybody in the DEOL final presentations. The 10 o'clock for next week, I will send those out when I send out that material in a few minutes. All right. If anybody has anything else for the good of the group. All right. I will hope to hear from you. If not, I'll see you in 3 weeks. Everybody have a good day. Thanks for joining.